A common misconception is that the Lockdang were cruel for the simple sake of cruelty, but this couldn't be farther from the truth. Those that served under them faithfully and without question were granted longer lifespans, access to the most advanced technology in the known galaxy, an end to resource shortages. It could have truly been a golden age of peace and prosperity across the galaxy, but just as they were not wholly cruel, the Lockdang were also not wholly benevolent. The truth is far more complicated. The brutal evening chill ran up Parvel's spine as the sun set over the border town of Terminus. Nights like this could be especially rough for a cold-blooded species such as himself. Parvel stood at the edge of the garrison's perimeter, his cloak doing little to ward off the creeping chill of the evening. He exhaled slowly, watching as his breath turned to mist before disappearing into the twilight air. The sun had nearly vanished beyond the jagged horizon, casting Terminus in that dim, flickering light between day and true darkness. The kind of light where trouble thrived. Behind him, the Frun-Sha garrison stood like a watchful beast, its squat, angular structures blending uneasily with the ramshackle aesthetic of Terminus. The locals called it an occupation. The Frun-Sha called it security. Parvel knew very well what it was. Intimidation. Something big was lurking over the horizon, and most of Clan Morrig was left in the dark. Not even Parvel understood the full extent of Morrig's plans. Normally, he would not question the wisdom of the Demot, but there was something off-putting about those strange aliens that kept whispering sweet nothings into his ear. Morrig's newfound obsession with the massive towers spread across Adamo had put the Frun-Sha at odds with an impressively large, if not disjointed, former pirate nation. Though it seemed the people of Terminus didn't much take to the word former, as the town was a cesspit of gangs, smugglers, thieves, and other undesirables. Parvel was led to believe that Libertalia was something of a paradise for those seeking free trade. So far, it failed to impress. A dull roar carried over the rooftops of Terminus, the sound of a distant argument spilling into the streets. The town never truly slept, but as night settled, its underbelly became more brazen and reckless. A pair of Frun-Sha sentries marched past, their heavy boots crunching against the dirt road, their rifles slung low but ready. They were watching the town, scanning for the smallest sign of defiance, and the people of Terminus were watching back. Parvel turned his gaze toward the marketplace just beyond the garrison's edge, where a cluster of traders and scavengers were finishing their business under flickering neon lamps. Normally, he wouldn't give them a second glance, but something in the air was different tonight. A tension, thinly veiled. Parvel was a warrior at heart. He knew they were on track for open conflict any day now, but still he sought to maintain a level head. He had no desire to actively antagonize the locals, but just as well, he would not tolerate open resistance to their presence. He was forced to meticulously ensure the two sides remained in balance, for failure on his part would be far more catastrophic than a mere tipped scale. A set of heavy boots approached from behind. Parvel didn't turn. He knew the sound of Vashir's stride well enough. The Olgek came to a halt beside him, the dark red of his armor dull in the fading light.
They hit us.
Parvel didn't move. He had been expecting this in some way.
Where?
South Depot. One of the supply caches. 4 crates of weapons gone. 2 guards dead. Locals, of course. Caught 'em off guard.
Parvel let out a slow breath, his claws flexing at his sides. This was inevitable. He had known it the moment they established the garrison here.
Do we know where they went?
They were gone by the time we knew it was happening, and the locals are keeping their lips tight.
Parvel sighed in frustration.
Lock down the town. No one leaves or moves cargo without our say. If you get any pushback, throw them in the holding cells. If they attack, defend yourselves.
And when we find the thieves...
A dark glimmer flickered across Parvel's eyes.
Frontier justice. If they want to act like outlaws, then we'll treat them like outlaws.
Bashir nodded.
We'll send them a strong message.
The wind howled through the fungal canopy, carrying with it the damp, earthy scent of decay. The forest floor was a tangled mess of roots and bioluminescent fungi, their soft glow providing just enough light to cast eerie shadows across the clearing. Several figures sat around a crackling fire underneath the moonlit sky. Lena fidgeted with the astral cage, the discarded remains of her ration packet sitting on the ground in front of her. Beth sat beside her, knees drawn up. Her eyes flickered toward the tree line, scanning the darkness for movement. Pretty much everyone had been like that ever since they left Armillaria, wary, restless. Barely a word had been spoken between anyone, creating an oppressive silence that smothered the entire team. Eckerd had distanced himself from the others, his demeanor eerily mirroring that of Stagrel's from the previous night. Lucas stared into the fire, disassociating himself from the outside world. Lena couldn't imagine the storm of thoughts that must have been swirling in his head. A part of her wanted to reach out, to ease the weight pressing down on him. But then her interaction with Eckerd came barreling into her mind to remind her that she'd only make things worse. What was wrong with her, thinking she was somehow qualified to help someone she barely knew like that? A naive child, that's all she was. A burden to those around her. Just look at what happened in the village. She got herself trapped underneath a bookcase of all things. What would have happened to Beth if Mason hadn't shown up? What would have happened to Mason if she had missed that last shot? They would have never been in that position if Lena had just moved out of the way instead of staring like an idiot. Her eyes trailed over to Tix, who was fiddling with Nova's Vic, tapping and scrolling through a multitude of random tabs. Such an odd thing. Why would he pass it on to Tix and not one of the other members of Magnus Company? Even disregarding the tension between them, Tix and Nova had only known each other for a day and a half. What connection could the two of them have possibly developed in that short amount of time for Nova to put such faith in him? It felt completely irrational, yet no one challenged it. Even Prophet handed it over without a second thought. Heck, she practically pleaded with him to take it. Her internal dialogue was cut short when she noticed Lucas staring at her out of the corner of her eye. His previously somber gaze was now more resolute and lingered on the artifact cradled within her grasp. She didn't speak first, instead opting to look at him with a patient expression, an invitation for him to make the first move.
Drennick, something's just occurred to me, and I need you to give me an explanation.
The astral cage buzzed in Lena's hands.
Of course, I am happy to assist.
You mentioned that Orin tasked you with studying the towers, as if their construction were a complete mystery to you.
That's correct. I have no knowledge of their origin.
But I thought the Lockdang built them.
Lena and Surlock both perked up at that moment.
Ah, yes. That was the story Orin weaved for the Lockdang. But those within his inner council knew the truth. The communion temples were already here when he discovered Adamo.
I don't understand. We are not the creators of the temples. Then who came before us? What being proved itself so worthy to commune with our gods before we did?
I do not know. Whoever built them left no trace of their origin.
None whatsoever? No records or inscriptions or some kind of data vault?
If it exists, then only Orin holds such knowledge. Though if he had something worthwhile to share, then I'm sure he would have done so back when I was still his advisor.
You're awfully confident of that.
As I should be. Orin had many counselors, but none were closer to him than me.
Good for you, but back to the temples. How do we destroy them? Can we destroy them?
I wish I knew. Every temple is shielded by a protective energy barrier invisible to the naked eye. It clings to the structure, as thin as a coat of paint. I never could figure out how to disable it.
Is it even worth it? Say we manage to disable the barriers. What then?
Well, I can't imagine the temples would last very long against an orbital bombardment. But I don't suppose you have a fleet of ships at your command.
There's plenty of old pirate vessels docked around the spaceports. If we could convince the captains and gang leaders to turn their guns on the temples, I'm sure it'd be enough firepower. But we've built entire cities around those temples. There's no way to justify that level of destruction.
If you could see the power of these temples firsthand, the destruction they can leave in their wake, you'd feel differently.
The fire reflected harshly off of Lucas's narrowing eyes as his posture stiffened.
I can't rationalize destroying the capitals of both Libertalia and the Frun-Sha just because they have the potential for harm.
Am I mistaken? Or did you not blindly decide to follow a map to an unknown destination in hostile territory for nothing more than the potential to find a mystical solution to all of your problems? Well, here I am, fully cooperative, yet you'd still prefer to spit on my solution for not meeting your standards.
Lucas held his tongue for a moment, raising his hands in a disarming manner.
I meant no offense, but what you're suggesting clashes with our goals here. If destroying the temples means demolishing my home, then that's not an idea I'll entertain.
His eyes shifted away towards the brooding Eckerd.
But as you've said, Zalma is the one we should be worrying about. And she needs to answer for what happened in Armillaria to both our people and Morrig's.
A thoughtful hum escaped from the astral cage.
Agreed. Whether she intended it or not, Armillaria's demise falls on her.
Lucas nodded.
So how do we find her?
Dozer sat amongst his fellow Magnus Company mercs at their own separate fire. A painful wheezing cough had plagued him ever since they set up camp, sparking the motherly concern he'd come to expect from Prophet. She boiled a tin of herbs over the fire and practically ordered him to drink the concoction. She'd get no argument from him. It didn't remedy the cough, but it did soothe the pain in his chest.
I think your gene mods are reacting poorly to those spores.
Dozer's coughing transitioned into a humorless, wheezing laugh.
As if I wasn't defective enough already. You know, I heard the Gen 3s don't have to deal with any of this stuff. The procedures actually increase their lifespans nowadays.
Prophet nodded, her eyes softened by sympathy.
Yeah, well, they had the luxury of entering the program after they burned through all the fresh guinea pigs.
Dozer shrugged.
Somebody had to volunteer, and we all knew our chances of survival weren't high.
But you had no idea that surviving would mean a decreased lifespan and your final years spent in agony.
Yeah, well, it never really bothered me before. I figured a bullet or a plasma bolt would kill me long before that.
His eyes lingered on the fire as his expression began to dour.
Vic used to always say I'd be the first to go. And when that day came, there'd be no tears because the peace I'd already made with it would have spread to everyone else.
A quiet chuckle pulled their attention towards Mason, sitting across from them.
He never could stop running his mouth, always saying the most tone-deaf shit.
His gaze focused on Dozer.
Crazy to think he went out before anyone else.
Dozer's eyes fell to the ground.
It should have been me.
Everything happened so fast. There was nothing you could have done.
Doesn't make the punch any softer.
We all make it sooner or later.
Smoke said as he entered from the shadows to kneel by the fire.
Not all of us get to choose when.
Dozer stared into the dancing flames, his thoughts a tangle of regret and hardened resolve.
I was supposed to have the shortest expiration date out of all of us, and I was fine with that so long as my gene mods gave me the strength to protect everyone around me.
He drew a deep, shuddering breath and clutched his side as another wave of pain reminded him of his frailties.
But now they're just making me a liability.
It's only been a few hours. No one thinks you're useless just yet.
I never used the word useless.
You didn't have to. We all knew what you meant.
Dozer's head snapped towards his company commander, only to find the eyes of his gas mask staring wistfully into the night sky. Smoke wasn't usually the personable type. His engagement with any conversation tended to be practical, matter of fact. But, in spite of that, they all knew he cared. The mask he wore hid the face of the man beneath, but its purpose was proof enough of his humanity.
No one is measuring your worth by your utility.
You might want to start if my condition worsens.
She lightly slapped his forearm.
How about you save that kind of talk until we're sure this isn't just a fleeting thing?
Seriously, just wait till morning. You'll feel like yourself again.
Another wheezing cough escaped Dozer's throat, prompting him to drink more of the herbal remedy to ease the pain.
I hope you're right.
The morning light greeted Parvel as he pored over the data pads on his desk. Teams were reporting the apprehension of suspects, all affiliates of some well-known local group. A sharp knock at his door pulled him from his reverie. Vashir's silhouette filled the doorway, grim determination etched into every line of his armored face.
We've brought in 2 more. They keep making reference to someone they call the Iron Maiden.
Parvel's eyes narrowed as he set aside his reports.
Do we know who she is?
Vashir shrugged.
The name's been tossed around in the markets, but we've never really taken an interest before now. They talk about her with an almost religious reverence. I think they may be a cult. All of her followers seem to be transhuman, though their cybernetics all look incredibly archaic.
Parvel grabbed a data pad and jotted down the new information.
I want to question those 2 you brought in.
Vashir nodded.
We'll get them ready for you.
He retreated from the office, leaving Parvel with his final reports. All of them had those same threads in common: tortured souls, Iron Maiden. Petty thieves with a shiny coat of paint, he thought. Though he didn't want to admit it, he felt as though their actions were a personal affront to him. Who were these people that thought themselves so bold to steal from his armory and murder 2 of his men? There would be no leniency for their transgressions. He would bring his fist down upon them in full force. But first, they would need to be found. He closed the final data pad with a click and calmly rose from his desk. He exited his office and marched down the narrow corridor towards the holding cells on the 1st floor. The facility was utilitarian, a far cry from the neon flickers and gritty pulse of the marketplace outside. He arrived outside the interrogation chamber, where Vashir was waiting for him. The Olgek handed him a data pad and briefed him on everything they knew about their 2 detainees. Surprisingly, they were both here of their own free will. One had introduced himself as Thalius of the Ordo Machinae, fancied himself a knight. His partner Elaine, on the other hand, was something of a raving madman. His cybernetics were outdated tech that looked like they'd been installed by a complete quack or a sadist. He was also a member of this tortured souls group Parvel kept hearing about. Per Thalius's request, Parvel would be interrogating them together due to Elaine's reluctance to speak without him. Parvel stepped into the stark, harshly lit interrogation chamber. 2 figures sat at a metal table. The first watched him curiously as he took his seat across from them. Parvel came to the conclusion that Thalius was no man, not anymore. His eyes were relentless, glinting sensors that betrayed nothing but calculation. There was no face, just a smooth metal shell. He wore an elegant tunic over a protective gambeson. The second figure, Elaine, refused to look at him, shuffling uncomfortably in his seat while muttering to himself. His cybernetics covered half his body, a pungent rust coating the point where flesh and metal met. He was no doubt suffering from an infection. His one organic eye was darting erratically as if haunted by unseen terrors.
Gentlemen, I'm Parvel, the garrison commander. My first lieutenant informs me that you sought us out about the incident last night.
Indeed, good sir.
Parvel regarded the metal knight curiously.
Thalius, is it? This group you mentioned, the Ordo Machinae?
Ordo Machinae.
Right. I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar.
'Tis understandable. Our number is few. We are dutiful knights, upholding a chivalric code of honor and justice.
You're a religious order, then?
Indeed. We serve the machine pantheon.
And what of your friend here?
He gestured to the twitching figure of Elaine.
Elaine is a tortured soul, a follower of the Iron Maiden.
And who is the Iron Maiden?
Elaine's body jerked violently as he interjected, his words barely coherent at first.
Maiden, prophet, she is the prophet of our salvation, and we are her humble flock.
The Maiden is How shall I put it? She is the byproduct of a blasphemous use of technology, an unwilling subject of horrid experiments, just like Elaine and the rest of her tortured souls.
Metal welded onto flesh. Burns, itches, can't soothe, can't scratch.
Thalius gently grasped the manic man's shoulder.
Calm your temperament.
Elaine's twitching ceased ever so slightly. Thalius released his hold and redirected his gaze towards Parvel.
Forgive him. Many of the tortured souls have begun to deteriorate, a result of the blasphemous misuse of cybernetics.
Thalius, please, explain what this is about.
Excuse my preamble. I do it only to help you understand. Elaine came to me in confidence and spoke of his misdeeds. I have brought him before you so that he may confess his sins for atonement.
Parvel observed Elaine curiously as he dipped his head in shame.
Atonement?
We stole weapons, but didn't kill. Not me. Was Jubal and Fetter. Said Finlow speaks to them, told them to kill, but can't be. Finlow speaks through the maiden.
Parvel shifted his gaze onto Thalius, seeking a translation of Elaine's ramblings.
So he helped steal the weapons, but didn't kill the guards?
Correct.
And who is this Finlow he's talking about?
'Tis their own interpretation of the machine gods. Where my order is polytheistic, the tortured souls are mono. They believe that the Iron Maiden is a prophet of their god Finlow. Ironic, given the maiden herself is secular.
Really? But they revere her regardless?
The maiden is protector. She is salvation. Without her, we are lost to the cold. Finlow works through her to test our faith.
So they believe.
You're skeptical?
Very much so, though I've not met her personally. 'Tis partly why I'm here today. You see, Elaine claims the maiden had no knowledge of their raid on your depot last night. My code demands that I enact justice where I can. Therefore, I am duty-bound to find the truth of the matter and ensure the guilty are punished.
He gestured to the ragged man sitting next to him.
Elaine is my gift to you. As the current authority of Terminus, it is only right that he be punished on your terms. But in return, I request to join you on your investigation and ensure only the guilty receive your wrath.
Parvel blinked at the metal man a few times, the gears in his head turning at Thalius's proposal.
That's not what I was expecting.
Do you object to my request?
Not outright. It's just, you're an outsider, you understand?
I assure you my motives are as dutiful as yours.
Parvel fidgeted with his datapad for a few moments before continuing.
And what kind of assistance are you offering?
My martial skills, for one. I am a trained warrior and can hold my own in a skirmish. But more importantly, I am already acquainted with a few other members of the tortured souls. With the assistance of both them and Elaine, I believe I may be able to track down the remaining thieves, as well as investigate the Iron Maiden to see if she truly was unaware of the robbery.
Parvel shifted his gaze onto Elaine.
So you question his claims then?
I believe in a healthy skepticism.
He huffed a slight chuckle.
Certainly. Now the question remains on how to deal with Elaine here.
Please, offer myself up, willing to divulge every detail and name everyone involved. I beg you, spare the others. Never meant to drag the Iron Maiden or comrades down with my error.
Well, I had planned on making an example of all the thieves, but given your cooperation, perhaps some leniency is in order.
Where I hail from, we remove the hands of those caught committing major thefts.
Elaine looked at his organic hand as he clenched it into a fist, his actions giving off the impression that Thalius had already discussed this with him.
That's a bold proclamation. Aren't you trying to help this man find some form of atonement for his actions?
Penitence does not come without consequence. In this instance, a hand is a small price to pay.
Well, perhaps I've misjudged the severity of your order then. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't find your argument compelling. I'll keep your suggestion in mind should Elaine fail to prove useful.
Punishment must come to those that have blasphemed. I throw myself at your mercy.
You can start by naming those responsible and telling me where they can be found.
Elaine nodded enthusiastically as the information spilled out of him like a landslide. The expedition team was preparing for the next leg of their journey, their campsite packed up and ready for the day's travel. As the first hints of sunrise bled into the horizon, Lucas gathered the team once more for a briefing of their recent revelations, mainly to update everyone on the information obtained from Drennick.
Immortality. I still can't wrap my head around it.
No wonder Morig is working with them.
But what does your sister want out of this? What happens if she gets her hands on the astral cage?
Imagine the power to summon a hurricane with a thought, to have nature's wrath upon your fingertips. Imagine poisoning the soil the farmers need to grow their crops, slowly starving an entire civilization for months. The people, made desperate by their hunger, begin to make offerings praying for the restoration of their silos. Satisfied with their offerings, you grant them a bountiful harvest with a mere snap of your fingers. The planet's population is now completely reliant upon you for their survival. Subjugation comes easily, and the little resistance that does arise is crushed with little effort. You have the power to pull ships from orbit and force them into the dirt. Enemy invaders will never stand a chance, and disloyal cowards who attempt to flee the planet will not even breach the atmosphere. Zalma will become a true god, and Adamo shall be her realm to rule.
Those temples are really that powerful?
Even more so.
No surprise why you're so adamant to destroy them. But if they're truly that powerful, then how is it the Lokdang don't still have control over the planet? We were under the impression that they had abandoned it.
A schism within the ranks of the Parlan would be to blame for that. To keep it brief, my siblings and I had let's call it a falling out with Orin, the stakes of which revolved around control over the temples. It's rather a shame that it was the first and last time my siblings and I managed to work together toward a common goal. Our alliance could have never been anything more than temporary, though. Zulma was far too power-hungry, and Mermil too spiteful. I foresaw their betrayal long before they were able to spring their trap on me.
Drennick paused a moment before his melancholic tone shifted back to a more neutral one.
But to answer your question, we were the ones to wrestle control of the planet from the Lokdang.
Okay, I'm getting it. You were all working together to capture the rest of the Parlen in the astral cage.
Yes. Orin would have been our final catch. The entire reason we allied with the Frun-Sha in the first place was because they stood the best chance at capturing him.
They didn't mind that you guys were...
Beth trailed off as she gestured to the astral cage.
You know, what you are.
They may call him Traxa the Merciless, but it is a deceiving title. He is a creature of honor and maintains a level head on his shoulders, though he carries a substantial amount of pain with him.
R grunted in affirmation.
Every Osmer shares his plight. His pain is our pain.
Eckert growled impatiently.
Can we stop pretending that any of this matters?
All heads turned to him.
The origins of the temples, the Lokdang's history on Adamo, none of it matters.
He turned to Lucas, fixing him with an impatient glare.
Killing Zalma is our goal, is it not?
Lucas gave him a pensive look before reluctantly nodding his head.
It is.
Okay. Do we have a plan for how we do that?
Lucas sighed heavily.
I do, but I don't think you'll like it much.
Eckert shrugged dismissively.
You already hit rock bottom with Armillaria. It can't be any worse than that.
Lucas shook his head, choosing to ignore Eckert's biting remark.
The cleanest way we solve this is without stepping on the toes of the Frun-Sha in the process. So, we convince Morig to hand over Zalma.
The reaction of the group ranged from confusion to skepticism.
Begging your pardon, Lucas, but you'll not find Morig in a reasonable state if you're planning on stealing his chance at immortality.
I want to make a deal with him. If he hands over Zalma, we'll give him his immortality.
A tense silence fell over the group for several grueling seconds.
Are you mad? Have you not been listening to a word I've said?
Drennick.
Are my sacrifices to be for naught? Is that what you mean to tell me?
Drennick.
Everything I've done, everything I've lost, all of it to be taken for granted by the likes of you.
Look, I'm sorry, but this isn't about you.
You can't be serious, Mr. Weber. You want to make a deal with Morig of all people?
My thoughts exactly. You can't even trust that bastard to tell you what color the sky is, let alone trust that he won't stab you in the back.
And tell me what choice we have? You lot want to sit here and pretend that we're not desperate. That's all well and good. But don't expect me to feed your delusions. I don't want a war with the Frun-Sha. I don't want to live in fear of these temples. And I sure as hell don't want to destroy them if that means demolishing our own cities. So I'll give Morig what he wants.
After a few tense seconds, Prophet reluctantly shrugged.
The devil you know, right?
Her eyes lingered on the astral cage in Lena's hand, leaving the second half of the idiom unspoken.
Except not all of us know him.
Knowing him makes it all the worse. Giving someone like him immortality is irresponsible beyond measure.
And we keep the astral cage as part of the deal. That way we're the ones with access to the tool, capable of capturing his mind.
We'd also be holding onto the key to the temples. You sure he'd agree to that?
He'll have to if he wants his immortality.
You're walking a razor's edge. Mind where you step.
Lucas leaned forward, a hard crease in his furrowed brow.
We've minded every step we've taken, and will continue to do so.
The recent deaths of your compatriots would beg to differ. But by all means, ignore my counsel. You clearly have everything under control.
The light of the astral cage flickered off as the device closed into its solid metal state, its surface reflecting the opening hours of dawn. The silence that followed was thick and electric as the group exchanged wary glances. Beth was the first to break it.
So what now?
We find Morig.
His eyes fell on Tix.
Can you make contact with our mole?
Tix hesitated a moment.
I can try, but I can't guarantee he'll respond.
We just need a location. We can handle the rest from there.
Tix nodded before drafting up a message for the mole.
Once we know where he is, a few of us can head there and try to get an audience with him.
His eyes drifted towards Lena.
We keep the astral cage far away from him, which means you're not coming with us.
Lena nodded in understanding. Lucas turned to Tix next.
You too. We can't rule out Morig trying to hold us against our will, or at the very least confiscating our equipment. No sense in risking our ability to access one of our best assets.
Dozer's wheezing cough drew attention to himself.
Should probably leave me behind too.
I only want to take a few of you.
He turned to Lauren and Icarus.
You two are staying behind for obvious reasons.
Afraid we'll hurt his feelings with a little criticism, eh?
No, Icarus. It's because trusting you with diplomacy is like trying to butter toast with a chainsaw. I need to bring level heads that can solve as many problems with their words as they can their fists.
Beth's gaze jumped to Lucas.
Then I volunteer.
Lucas's lips curved upward.
I was hoping you would.
Are you certain it's wise to bring a young woman along to meet with Morig? I mean no disrespect, of course. It's just, we've all heard the rumors.
You're worried he'll take a liking to me?
It's a possibility worth considering. I wouldn't want him to see you and try to recruit you as part of the deal.
I won't entertain anything of the sort.
Anyone else would be risking capture or death. If Morig tries anything, I can handle it.
Lauren released a deflated sigh.
See to it that you do.
Well, that's one. I think 2 more will do us. Martin, Amy, would you care to be our 3 and 4?
Naturally.
Prophet turned her worried gaze towards Dozer.
I don't want to leave him in case his condition worsens.
Dozer released a ragged sigh but didn't argue. Liz was quick to step forward.
I'll take her place. I've got a head for negotiation.
That works. Once we find out where he's holed up, we'll make our way there.
If I were a betting fella, I'd say he was slogging down wine in dim Traxxia. Probably got himself a big fancy mansion and everything.
That does sound like him.
I guess I'll bear that in mind if the mole doesn't pull through.
The markets of Terminus were as tense as ever, especially now that Parvel had increased patrols. Though he had to admit, it was almost refreshing to be out in the field again. He'd been cooped up in an office, filling out mind-numbing reports for far too long. He was accompanied by Thalius and Vashir, the 3 of them personally taking the lead on this investigation. The 3 moved through the tight corridors of Terminus's marketplace, past stalls lit by buzzing neon strips and tables piled high with scavenged goods. The scent of cooked meat mixed with the acrid stench of burning refuse, and the murmur of vendors hawking wares barely covered the tension in the air. People knew. They always knew. The moment the Frun-Sha tightened their grip, the locals took notice. They could feel the hunt in the air. Parvel caught wary glances from the stall owners, hushed words exchanged as he passed. Fear and resentment woven together like a piece of cloth. Vashir grunted.
You'll know we're coming.
Which begs the question, why hasn't he gone to ground yet?
Thalius, moving with calculated grace beside them, scanned the crowd with cold, synthetic eyes.
Panic draws attention. By not changing his typical behavioral patterns, he creates a veil of innocence.
Parvel didn't respond. His gaze flicked toward a cluster of workers unloading cargo from a rusted hauler at the far end of the market. Among them, he spotted the distinct glint of metal, old, corroded cybernetics embedded in flesh. the telltale sign of a tortured soul. Elaine had given 4 names, 2 of which were already in custody: Jubal, Fetter, Tarek, and Reese. If Elaine was to be believed, only Jubal and Fetter had killed anyone. Unfortunately, they were not the ones in custody. As they approached the augmented man, Parvel gestured subtly to his companions. Bashir gave a curt nod and adjusted the grip on his rifle as Thalia stepped to the side, his metal frame giving him a commanding presence. The workers noticed them immediately. The chatter stopped. Eyes darted. A man at the edge of the group, lean, wiry, with a mechanical brace around his left arm, set down a crate with deliberate care, not turning to face them. Parvel breathed in through his nose, puffing out his chest and speaking in a commanding tone.
Fetter.
The man stiffened. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he turned. His organic eye was sharp, calculating. The mechanical one, a rusted old thing with a flickering red lens, whirred as it focused.
Commander Parvel, to what do I owe the pleasure of a personal visit?
You know why I'm here.
Fetter's gaze flickered to Vashir's weapon, then to Thalius.
Can't say I do.
Parvel wasn't in the mood for games.
4 crates of weapons, 2 dead guards. I suggest you stop pretending.
Fetter tilted his head as if considering his options, then nodded.
Okay, let me guess. It was Elaine. He cooked up some story about us robbing you or something, right?
He tells me you're a murderer.
Fetter laughed off the accusation.
A murderer? Don't tell me you trust a word coming out of his mouth.
He pointed a finger at his own temple.
I don't know if you've noticed, but he's not exactly all there.
Parvel took a step closer, his tone measured but unyielding.
Stop trying to weasel out of this. We know you stole the weapons. Tell us where they are.
Fetter didn't flinch.
I don't know what you're talking about.
As Fetter spoke, Parvel felt something tingling at the back of his mind. A subtle massaging sensation that seemed to coerce him into believing Fetter. The uninitiated tended to believe this to be their intuition, or perhaps their conscience pulling them in a certain direction. But Parvel recognized the feeling all too well. These were someone else's thoughts disguising themselves as his own. Parvel held Fetter's gaze for a long, heavy second. Then, without a word, he stepped back and nodded to Bashir. The Olgek moved fast. Before Fetter could react, Bashir's rifle swung up, the butt slamming into his gut. Fetter gasped, doubling over. In the same motion, Bashir grabbed the back of his jacket and wrenched him upright. A few of the workers shifted as if to intervene, but Thalius merely looked at them. His unblinking optics reflected their faces, cold and impassive. Nobody moved. Parvel leaned down to meet Fetter at eye level.
Where are the weapons?
Fetter sucked in a painful breath. Then, through gritted teeth, he rasped,
I don't know what you're talking about!
Parvel sighed in frustration. He stood upright and addressed Bashir.
Take him.
Bashir yanked Fetter's arms behind his back and restrained him with magnetic cuffs. The rest of the workers watched in tight-lipped silence, their eyes betraying barely contained fury. Parvel turned to them, his expression unreadable.
Try anything and you'll share his fate.
Nobody spoke, nobody moved. Satisfied, the trio exited the area with Fetter in custody. Icarus's guess was right on the money. Morig was indeed in Frun-Sha. The team had hit the trail as soon as they had confirmation. Lucas took the lead, his posture tense but determined. He was grateful to have direction again, as flawed as it was. They needed something to grasp onto right now, some semblance of hope. This would have to be enough to sustain them until they reached the Frun-Sha capital city. They were a ways off, but Eckerd seemed confident that they could reach it before nightfall. There was supposedly a town along the way that could provide them with transportation. Lena walked beside Beth, tightening her grip on the strap of her satchel. The astral cage felt heavier now. Heck, everything felt heavier now. She thought back to Drennick's anger when Lucas proposed the deal with Morig. Was he still listening? Still fuming within his metal confines? She glanced at the satchel, half expecting to hear his voice, but he remained silent. Beth spared her a glance and spoke.
You gonna be okay without me for a while?
Lena gave a short, humorless laugh.
Me? You're the one walking into the lion's den.
Beth smirked.
Yeah, but I'm way more competent.
Excuse me?
Lena said through a chuckle.
Have you forgotten how many ruins I plundered on Etheria all on my own?
Beth's smirk grew wider.
I don't know. I never saw you go into those ruins.
What? But you saw the artifacts I brought back.
Beth shrugged.
You could have got those from anywhere.
What, just lying around?
Or maybe you were making replicas. You know, cheap knockoff stuff. As long as the buyer wasn't psionically gifted, they'd never know the difference.
Lena shook her head while trying to contain the smile that had formed.
Shut up.
Beth chuckled, her mood skyrocketing at the sight of Lena's smile. It hurt to see her friend so dour. This little pick-me-up was something they both desperately needed. Their trek lasted for several hours. Eckhard was ready to throw caution to the wind and travel along the main road, but Lucas forbade it. At least the Olgek was still willing to listen to him. The group halted when the forest became less dense, and civilization was only a stone's throw away. This is where the two groups would part ways. The makeup of their crew was far too conspicuous to risk walking into one of the settlements together, so they made camp in a secluded location to hole up until the business with Morrig was concluded. Beth adjusted the strap of her pack, rolling her shoulders.
Better not waste any time.
Lucas nodded.
Agreed.
He turned back to the others.
We'll check in when we reach Morrig. Stay put and keep your heads down.
Icarus gave an exaggerated salute.
Aye, aye, fearless leader. Try not to get yourselves killed.
Arcade didn't spare him a glance as he moved to depart.
Here's hoping.
Best of luck.
Liz and Sam shared a final glance before she left with the other three. Their destination, the town of Veltrin. The walk was a relatively short one, especially once they reached the main road. Beth felt an overwhelming discomfort at being so blatantly exposed. The past 2 days had been nothing but wilderness and an abandoned village, but for some reason, civilization didn't seem any more appealing at that moment. As they approached Veltrin, the first thing they noticed was the blatant contrast with Armillaria, not just in the town's architecture, but in its activity as well. Ahead, they could already see a bustling corridor of life. Residents moved with purpose, a mixture of wary veterans, itinerant traders, and resilient locals, each etched with the fatigue of frontier living. The architecture was an uneasy marriage of necessity and ambition. Towering modular structures, patched together from salvaged starship hulls and prefabricated colony units, loomed over streets carved from the hard-packed dirt. A hollow banner buzzed erratically in the late morning haze, depicting a white dragon accentuated by a thick red smoke surrounding it. A slight tension built up as the group stepped through the entrance. A pair of Frun-Sha enforcers leaned against a reinforced barricade near the gate, their dull gray armor marked with the crimson etchings of Clan Morrig. They barely spared a glance, just another group of travelers passing through. The main thoroughfare was alive with movement. Traders hauled crates of off-world tech, shouting offers over the din of sputtering engines and clanking machinery. A cluster of mechanics argued over the remains of a downed skiff, its hull still streaked with plasma burns. Smoke curled from the open-air food stalls where vendors grilled spiced meats over crackling heat plasma burners, the scent mingling with the acrid bite of oil and ozone. Somewhere deeper in the town, music thumped, raucous and wild, almost drowning out the mechanical drone of docking lifts hauling cargo into the upper levels of the settlement. It was somewhat overwhelming to be exposed to so many people again, like stepping into a whole new world. Parvel was growing restless. The streets were a pressure cooker, and every moment that passed without progress felt like a fuse burning down. He sat across from Fetter in the dimly lit interrogation room, who'd proven to be more than difficult.
Why'd you murder those men?
I didn't murder anyone, Commander. I was at home, sleeping soundly in my grav tube.
That subtle massaging coercion from earlier had returned. Parvel knew he couldn't doubt himself for a moment, lest he fall under Fetter's spell.
You realize that I have authorization to execute you, right? I showed Elaine leniency when he came clean, and I can do the same with you.
Well, that's very kind of you, Commander. If I had something to confess, that would certainly factor into my decision.
Parvel sighed in frustration.
How about I go straight to the Iron Maiden then? See what she thinks about all of this. Elaine told me that you did this behind her back.
Firstly, we didn't do anything. Period. But even if we did, the Maiden wouldn't sell out her tortured souls for any reason.
Really? Even if your actions lead to me marching my soldiers onto her doorstep?
A subtle furrow found its way onto Fetter's brow. The first crack in his armor.
You defile her peace over speculation?
No, over a confession from one of your own.
The sensation flared up ever so slightly, enough to make it blatantly obvious to Parvel.
Elaine is a madman that can barely perceive reality anymore. He's sick.
Parvel nodded in agreement.
You may have a point there.
He fidgeted with his datapad for a few seconds.
But, you know, the differences between you two got me thinking. Elaine comes off as so manic, so zealously devoted to the Maiden. Why would he risk her safety by coming to me? Part of me thought, maybe he's trying to pass off the blame to someone else, make a sacrifice for the greater good. I half expected you to be another rambling lunatic, barely worth my time.
His eyes met Fetter's.
But then you opened your mouth and I could tell. You're smart, devious, manipulative, nothing like Elaine. He's a rambling mess, but he's still honest about his devotion. You're as zealous as he is, but you don't wear it on your sleeve. Why is that?
Fetter's eyes remained narrowed.
I don't understand what your point is.
My point, Fetter, is that you're psionically gifted. You've been trying to worm your way into my head since the moment we met.
Fetter froze in place, fixing Parvel with a scowl that betrayed his nervousness. Parvel felt a smug expression form on his own face.
I mean, really, Fetter? I was a servant of the Lockdang for most of my life. You're nowhere near as subtle as they were.
Fetter's eyes found the table between them and remained glued there. Now Parvel just had to prod until he found a place to hook onto.
Now all of this just begs the question, are you actually loyal to the Iron Maiden?
Fetter's gaze shot towards Parvel with barely contained fury.
Don't you dare question my loyalty to the Maiden. She's our savior, our refuge in a galaxy that doesn't give a damn about us.
Then why do you insist on dragging her down with you? That raid on our depot might as well have been an act of war. Yet you'd rather let the Maiden take the heat than admit to your crimes. Unless, of course, the Maiden ordered you to raid it.
She'd never risk our lives in such a manner. She loves all of her tortured souls, but her love makes her overprotective.
So you did it behind her back?
We didn't do anything.
Fetter had lost his defiant tone at this point, instead sounding like an automaton. His defenses were so weak now that Parvel opted to ignore them.
You and Jubal told Elaine that Finlow had spoken to you. Is that not blasphemy according to your own beliefs?
There was no blasphemy.
It seemed Parvel had struck another nerve.
Jubal and I heard his voice. We glimpsed his visions. They carried instructions for us to follow.
Parvel tapped on his datapad, his eyes narrowing with each crumb of information.
And what were those instructions, Fetter?
For a long, agonizing moment, Fetter's gaze wavered between defiance and despair.
I'm not permitted to say.
You killed 2 men, Fetter, and you stole military equipment from my depot. Were those the instructions?
No, you wouldn't understand.
Parvel leaned forward.
Is that so? You said Jubal saw the visions too. He's psionically gifted as well, isn't he? The two of you had a similar experience and convinced yourselves you'd receive some kind of divine proclamation from your machine god, and that gave you the excuse to raid our depot. Is that correct? Or am I misunderstanding the situation?
Fetter's eyes flickered with a mix of desperation and something almost resembling remorse as the silence in the cold, sterile chamber deepened.
Commander, this was not an act of malice. The visions, they spoke of an archive, a wealth of knowledge that could cure us of our ailments.
Fetter's fingers twitched uncontrollably against the edge of the metal table.
In the quiet of my mind, amid the static of our thoughts, there came a vision, a faded image of a Lockdang data unit. Alongside it came a voice, a cold, metallic murmur that declared, "For those who seek an escape from decay and madness, here lies the answers you seek." Jubal heard it too, clear as day.
Parvel's features tightened as he absorbed the confession.
What does that have to do with attacking my depot?
Terminus was built on top of a Lockdang library of sorts. The Hollow Market was once littered with data units filled with forbidden knowledge. and now they're sitting in the private collection of a local pirate captain. If one wanted to relieve him of his collection, they would certainly require weapons.
You raided our depot so you could use the weapons to raid someone else?
It's a complicated situation. Your people are still new to the area. You've yet to find your footing here. This captain, the one we want to rob, he's been here since Libertalia's founding. He's had plenty of time to dig in and fortify himself. We were planning to hire mercenaries for the job and use the weapons as payment.
Parvel leaned back slowly, his fingers drumming in irregular rhythm against the side of the datapad. The faint whir of the overhead fan filled the silence, but the tension in the room had crystallized, thick and stifling.
I'll admit, I wasn't expecting you to confess to planning another crime halfway through denying the first.
Fetter spoke through gritted teeth.
I'm trying to make you understand.
I understand plenty. I understand that you murdered 2 of my men and stole my weapons because voices in your head gave you delusions of salvation.
They're not delusions. You think we want to believe in whispers and static and machine gods? We're not madmen, Commander. We're drowning. And when you're drowning, you'll reach for anything that looks like it might float. We were made wrong, Commander. Every day, the corruption inside us grows stronger. The Maiden keeps us alive, but it's like patching a sinking ship. We need something more. A cure.
I'll gladly give you a cure, you and Jubal.
Fetter's eyes widened in terror.
You can't. Jubal has no doubt already sought the Maiden's protection for his deeds, and she would never allow harm to come to any of her tortured souls. Executing me will only encourage her to resent you.
Why would she protect him if he was going behind her back?
Because she loves all of her tortured souls as a mother loves her children. She'll ask you to kill her in our stead, but I beg of you, spare her. We can't lose her.
I have no interest in killing the Maiden.
It won't matter. If you threaten the lives of me and Jubal, or worse yet, execute me now, she will never forgive you. You'll have started down the road to mutual destruction.
Are you asking me to let you go? Just to appease the Maiden? And what of the men you and Jubal killed? What shall I tell their families, their mothers?
Parvel's jaw tightened, his voice a low growl that filled the oppressive silence of the cell.
The Iron Maiden's love for you is not an excuse to defy responsibility.
Fetter's eyes darted about, searching for any sign of mercy.
Commander, listen, I beg you. Jubal has already sought her protection. In her wisdom, she shields us from the darkness that consumes our souls. Spare me, and you spare her, the one light we have left in this forsaken galaxy.
Parvel scoffed, leaning forward so that the harsh glare of the overhead lamp etched deep lines across his face.
If I were to release you, Fetter, it would be an insult to the people I am sworn to lead. I will not hear their cries for justice echo into an empty, uncaring void.
He rose slowly from his chair, his shadow looming large over the quivering prisoner.
Your fate was sealed by your own hands.
Parvel turned his back on the man, planning to leave the room, but his joints stiffened, locking him in place. He felt something, an invisible force compelling him, forcing him, to look back at Fetter. That bastard had taken hold of his mind, stringing him along like a puppet. But his hold was weak, sloppy. No wonder he tried to take the subtle approach first. Parvel fought back with all his might, his efforts causing physical exertion. When he reached for the gun sitting on his hip, he wasn't sure if it was his decision or Fetter's. The answer became clear when the barrel didn't find its way towards Fetter, but instead started slowly positioning itself towards his own skull. He strained himself to hold the weapon at bay, playing a deadly game of tug-of-war with the restrained cyborg. Without warning, the door burst open and Vashir stormed in with his weapon drawn and Thalius in tow. Seeing this, Fetter made a desperate gambit and blasted a wave of psionic energy directly at them, launching both Parvel and Vashir off their feet. The blast attacked their nervous systems, sending excruciatingly painful shocks throughout their bodies. Thalius, however, absorbed the attack and closed the distance with Fetter. A blade extended from the top of his forearm and was driven straight into Fetter's chest. Fetter's lips parted as if to speak, but all that came out was a wet cough, speckling his chin with blood. His eye fluttered, and then, with a final shuddering breath, he slumped forward onto the table. Thalius ripped the blade from Fetter's chest, retracting it back into his arm before moving to help Vashir and Parvel. Parvel groaned as he pushed himself upright, the residual tingling of Fetter's psionic assault still lingering in his limbs. He forced himself to stand, inhaling sharply as the last remnants of pain pulsed through him. His fingers flexed at his sides, and his gaze drifted to the lifeless body slumped over the table. Fetter was dead. He was prepared to execute the man when the time was right, but seeing his bloody form in the interrogation chamber felt... He didn't quite know what word he was looking for. Wrong? Improper? Next to him, Thalius was helping Vashir to his feet. The Olgek let out a growl.
Damn science. Serves the bastard right.
Thalius's robotic eyes locked onto Fetter's corpse.
I wish he hadn't forced my hand.
Don't tell me you feel sorry for him. Not after that.
If what he said was true, then 'twill complicate matters with the Iron Maiden.
If she really means to protect her precious murderous son, then she'll die alongside him.
Bashir.
What? We both know where this is heading. There's no peaceful solution here. I say we find where the Iron Maiden is hiding and storm the place.
You'd openly start a war with the tortured souls before even attempting a diplomatic approach.
Oh, we'll be diplomatic. I'll string up Fetter's corpse for all to see. It'll send a message of what happens when you defy the Frun-Sha.
No, we try to appeal to the Maiden first. See if we can't get her to see reason and hand over Jubal without incident.
And if she takes up arms against us?
Parvel's eyes narrowed.
Then you get to have your way.
Vashir was clearly not enthusiastic about the idea, but he reluctantly agreed.
Fine.
He turned to Fetter's corpse, his blood now pooling onto the metal table.
What do we do with him, then?
If I may make a suggestion, we could return his body to the Iron Maiden as a gesture of good faith.
Parvel took a moment to consider.
She could easily see it as a threat or an insult, killing one of her own just to hand him back like a broken toy.
Thalius inclined his head slightly.
That depends on how we present it. We tell her the truth. Fetter confessed, but when confronted with justice, he resisted. His death was unfortunate, but not undeserved. We've done nothing wrong. 'Twould serve nothing for us to hide the truth and be caught in a lie.
Parvel shared a look with Vashir. Even the Olgek seemed satisfied with the knight's assessment.
Wisely spoken. Do you think you can find her?
Elaine will know. We may even be able to use him to get an audience for us.
Then let's not waste time.
He gestured to Fetter.
Vashir, get him cleaned up and make him look as presentable as we can. We'll get a few squads ready while Thalius works with Elaine.
They had to ask for directions, but they managed to find the transport station. Shuttles were ferried in and out of the port, their electronic whirs adding to Veltrin's already industrial soundscape. Overhead were flickering signs advertising routes to various settlements across the Frun-Sha territory, with prices displayed in multiple languages. At least the Frun-Sha were using the galactic standard credit system. Currency exchange was not a headache they needed to deal with right now. The quartet had little trouble finding a shuttle bound for Dimtraksha, seeing as it was the most popular destination. Their transport was a patchwork of reinforced plating, exposed wiring, and hastily welded seams. When Beth stepped onto the ramp, she could feel the vibrations of the ship's engines idling beneath her feet. The interior reeked of engine refuse and was lined with rows of worn crash couches sitting on either side of an open aisle. The four of them found a seat in the back. Beth was expecting the shuttle to be packed to the brim with travelers, but there were only 3 other passengers on board.
Probably for the best. The less eyes and ears on us, the better.
The intercom crackled, releasing a wave of static before a heavily accented voice announced their departure. The docking clamps released with a loud clang and the shuttle lifted into the air, causing a wave of vertigo to crash through Beth. She exhaled slowly as she watched the town of Veltrin shrink beneath them. They were truly committed now, hitching a ride on a Frun-Sha vessel to go straight into their capital city. As the ship settled into its flight path, the low hum of the engines provided a steady background noise. The team sat in tense silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts.
So why'd you want to come?
Liz's question stirred Beth from her thoughts. She spoke in a quiet tone, clearly being conscious of the other passengers on the transport.
I mean, why were you so quick to volunteer for this?
Beth leaned back against the worn seat, considering her words carefully.
Well, someone had to, right? And if this is really our plan, then I'd like to be in a position where I can at least have some kind of control over the situation, rather than sitting around at camp.
Do you think it's a good idea, though?
Beth hesitated while glancing towards Lucas, who sat across from them with a curious glare.
I wouldn't have volunteered if I thought it was a bad plan. We're not exactly swimming in options right now, and I'm not the right person to make a judgment call on Morig one way or another. But I trust Lucas enough to defer to his judgment.
Lucas gave her an amused grin.
You don't have to say that just because I'm sitting here.
I'm not, believe me. If I thought you were marching us off a cliff, you'd be getting an earful from me.
Liz chuckled.
That I don't doubt.
Arcade, who had been listening quietly, finally leaned forward, his voice thoughtful.
All right, so let's say we get an audience with Morig. What then? How exactly are we playing this?
Lucas exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face.
Well, ideally we tell him about what happened to Armillaria, and it's enough to convince him that Zalma isn't worth trusting. But realistically, he'll want something more from us to prove that we're a better alternative.
That's assuming he doesn't already know about Armillaria, and that he cares what happened there.
I wouldn't worry about that. He's a real bastard, but he still cares about his people.
Even so, we're not exactly shining examples of trust ourselves. I'm part of the reason his deal with the Fractured couldn't follow through. I'd expect some bitterness from that.
It's not like he knows you personally, and besides...
His eyes shifted around the shuttle as his voice lowered even further.
Stealing the object is a far cry from wiping out an entire village.
Plus we have Drennick. That gives us all the leverage we need.
That's what worries me. Morig won't want to ally with us until he's sure he can tip the scales in some way. Which means he'll set a price for his cooperation beyond what we're offering.
Lucas nodded.
Then I suppose we have to hope it's a price we can pay.
Well, what do we know about him? You said he was a jar, right? I barely know anything about their species.
A brief silence passed between the others. Lucas exchanged a glance with Liz and Arcade before turning back to Beth.
Do you know what happened to the jar after the long 87?
Beth shook her head.
I just know that they mostly lived on oceanic worlds.
Lucas nodded.
The Lockdang used most of them for underwater scavenging and mining, and they were occasionally used as warriors when fighting other aquatic species, like the Shelvets. But what's important is that most of them lived underwater, and after the long 87 ended and the jar stood against the Empire.
He halted for a moment, trying to find a tasteful way of describing the events that followed.
The Lockdang found creative ways of dealing with their populations. They dumped toxins into the oceans. They built massive heat generators and orbital solar reflectors to boil the seas of their homeworlds. They developed viruses and engineered microorganisms to target their biology. Most people think it was the Orsma who got it the worst. But that's only because there aren't enough jar left to tell the tale.
Beth shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her thoughts lingering on the images Lucas had just painted in her mind. The jar's story weighed on her, and for a moment the hum of the shuttle's engines faded into the background as her mind drifted.
Christ, so they were practically wiped out?
Lucas nodded solemnly, his eyes distant.
The Lockdang were thorough. They didn't just fight them. They systematically dismantled their entire way of life. Most of them didn't stand a chance. And the ones who chose to live as land dwellers on non-oceanic worlds were few and far between.
Beth swallowed hard, the heavy image of an entire race nearly wiped from existence making her stomach churn. Suddenly, puzzle pieces started clicking in her head. If you were subject to that kind of systematic slaughter, wouldn't the concept of attaining immortality be oh so tantalizing? To never have to fear the fate that befell so many of your own kind. She finally felt herself getting a grasp on Morig's motives, and it frightened her. She knew very well that tragedy breeds ambition, both good and ill. Lena sat cross-legged on the ground as she ran her fingers along the cool, metallic surface of the astral cage. Drennick had notably cooled off since his outburst earlier. He apologized for his behavior, but other than that was quick to move on from the topic, settling back into his role as their helpful guide. To Lena's surprise, it was actually Widow, that was the first one to bombard him with questions. The topic of her interest was that of the Lokdang abductions during the height of their power, something often buried underneath the myriad of other atrocities committed by the Lokdang.
They called them compliance tithes. Entire settlements vanished overnight. Families torn from their homes under the guise of strategic relocation or military conscription.
Widow's brow furrowed as she crouched beside Lena.
I'm familiar with the tithes. I want to know what happened to the people that were taken.
Ah, would it sate your curiosity to know they all perished?
No, I need specifics.
A quiet pause followed, only broken by the distant hum of wind through the fungal canopy. Finally, Drennick sighed, a low mechanical hum reverberating through the cage.
I know you think knowledge will put your mind at ease, but I must insist that ignorance is bliss when it comes to this particular topic.
Lena looked between them, the tension crackling like static in the air. She didn't know much about Widow's past, but the way her shoulders had stiffened, how her breathing had subtly shifted, said enough. Widow wasn't asking out of morbid curiosity.
I don't need bliss, I need the truth. Surlock said they were sacrifices for the gods, but what did the Lokdang actually do to them? Where are their bodies? Were there even any bodies left?
Another long silence. Then Drennick spoke, his voice distant and deliberate, as if dredging the words from somewhere deeply buried.
How do you think the temples are able to reconstruct a body for the Parlin? Where do you think that biomatter comes from?
Lena's breath caught in her throat. Widow didn't flinch, though her eyes darkened with a dangerous glacial stillness.
The temples use the bodies of the abducted to rebuild you.
What's left of them, at least. It mixes the DNA of the various species, utilizing their most desirable traits, both physical and psionic, to build us a more robust form.
Lena felt her stomach twist. She'd witnessed the grandeur of the temple in Libera Civitate firsthand. She'd marveled at its craftsmanship, thinking it divine in its own right. But now, how could she ever look upon it as anything more than a grave? A factory of death reconstituting flesh into something unnatural, immortal. Widow rose slowly to her feet. Her expression didn't change, no tears, no visible rage, but something in her presence shifted.
Your immortality is tied to the flesh of countless victims. And now, Morrig wants a piece of the same pie.
Drennick did not respond at first. Lena waited, half expecting a rebuttal, a defense, some excuse, but none came.
Yes, and that is why I broke from Orin. Why I so desperately wish to see these temples destroyed. The suffering and anguish inflicted by their very existence is repulsive.
Widow stood in silence for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the dirt.
It was my husband. Well, not just him, but yeah. He was taken for one of the tithes. We were told it was conscription, but then the stories started coming out about their true nature, and I guess I always knew. Not the how or the why, just that my husband was gone.
Lena didn't know what to say. There was no condolence strong enough, no gesture gentle enough to touch the kind of grief Widow carried. It clung to her like a second skin, quiet, heavy, old.
I'm sorry,
Lena finally said, the words hollow, fragile. She hated how small they sounded. Widow didn't respond. She didn't have to. The wistful sigh of acceptance, the way she walked wordlessly to the edge of camp with a posture like iron. That was her answer. A chapter closed. A long, long chapter, put to bed with only a few words. The simplicity of it all seemed oddly cruel in some way. Elaine had come through. The Iron Maiden invited them to parley on neutral ground. The meeting place was a tavern in the Hollow Market, a network of underground tunnels and cramped marketplaces beneath the surface of Terminus. Parvel led his soldiers through the neon-lit corridors, taking in the sights and sounds of Terminus's literal underbelly. There seemed to be a mutual understanding among Terminus's gangs when it came to the Hollow Market. The place was neutral territory for everyone. No one laid claim over it. The perfect place to trade black market items. If you were looking for something rare or dangerous, This was the place to go. Parvel took a peek at the coffin his soldiers were transporting, knowing Fetter's body was respectfully covered by the dark, tinted glass of its lid. It probably looked strange to the onlookers who watched the group of soldiers march through the darkened corridors with a coffin in tow. They probably thought the coffin actually contained some valuable artifact or smuggled contraband. After all, why would a corpse need so much security? But of course, if anyone had the audacity to attack them, they'd be dead before they could feel disappointed. The narrow corridors twisted and funneled them deeper until, at last, they opened into a vast, hollowed-out chamber pulsing with color and life. The ceiling arched high above, lost in a haze of smoke and flickering neon signs, their glow smeared across damp stone like war paint. Makeshift taverns, vendor stalls, and back-alley clinics clung to the walls like barnacles, cobbled together from scrap metal and oddly elegant masonry. Above them, suspended walkways and sculpted stone bridges crisscrossed the void, some carved by the Lockdang long ago, others slapped together by the colonists from salvaged ship hulls and steel rigging. Figures moved across the upper levels, their shadows cast long against the cavern walls, watching, trading, disappearing into alcoves and hidden doors. The tavern loomed ahead, its stone archway lit by a garish red sign flickering with half-dead letters. The smell of oil and cheap liquor clung to the air. The dull clunk of stone beneath their boots gave way to the hollow clang of steel as they entered. The tavern was full, not with patrons, but with the cybernetic gazes and half-metal faces of the tortured souls. Their forces matched Parvel's in number. No weapons were drawn, but none of them looked relaxed. At the center of the room, seated at a table beneath a hanging lamp, was a woman, or something resembling a woman at least. Her frame was tall, regal even. Worn robes covered most of her figure, but her limbs were unmistakably augmented, thick iron plating etched with symbols that pulsed dimly with energy. Her face was much like Thalias's, a mask of elegant chrome with shiny gold inlays. Though unlike Thalias, blonde hair flowed out from the top of her head down to her shoulders. Her glowing cybernetic eyes followed Parvel with every step. He stopped only a few meters from the table's edge. No one spoke. Silence filled the space, loaded with the weight of unspoken rules, of violence barely restrained. It was only broken by the soft click the coffin made when Parvel's soldiers set it on the floor. They stepped aside, their hands never drifting far from the grips of their weapons. Parvel allowed the pause to linger. Let her look. Let them all see the respect they had shown the dead. The Iron Maiden tilted her head slightly. The lamp above her swayed on its cable, casting long, swinging shadows across the table. One hand rose to rest on the tabletop, fingers drumming once. A gesture not of impatience, but calculation. Parvel met her gaze without flinching.
Iron Maiden, we bring you the body of Fetter. He died resisting arrest after confessing to the theft of our weapons, and the murder of 2 of my men.
She didn't move at first. Her gaze slipped from Parvel to the coffin, then back again. The dim light caught the curve of her chrome mask, giving her the ghostly air of a statue, elegant, cold, unmoved.
I know. Elaine told me everything.
She stood. The tortured souls behind her shifted, almost imperceptibly. Their joints clicked and whirred, rusted metal groaning beneath flesh. She approached the coffin, her boots nearly silent on the metal floor. When she came to a stop beside it, the maiden placed a hand gently on the glass.
You made him presentable.
I thought it only right.
Perhaps you're not the heartless cur I was led to believe you were.
She wasn't angry, but there was something in the stillness of her frame, the coiled restraint in her voice, that gave Parvel pause. It was the grief of someone who had not yet decided where to direct her pain. Thalias took a single step forward.
He attacked the commander, attempted to use psionics to seize his mind. Had I not intervened, Parvel would be dead.
The maiden inclined her head toward Thalius.
So he was killed by your hands then?
She looked back at the coffin.
He was a child in my care, another broken thing like so many others.
Parvel cleared his throat.
Both he and Elaine attested to your ignorance on their raid. Were they telling the truth?
She regarded him for a long moment.
What is it you want from me, Commander?
Parvel raised a brow.
The truth would be a good start.
The Iron Maiden turned and gestured to the table she'd risen from.
Then sit. I will tell you what you want to hear.
Parvel hesitated only briefly before moving to sit. Vashir and Thalius both joined him. She called the bartender for drinks and took a seat opposite them. She folded her hands atop the table and regarded Parvel with those unnatural eyes.
Elaine and Feta were telling the truth. I had no knowledge of the raid.
One of the tortured souls stepped forward, his face a patchwork of burn-scarred flesh and bolted chrome, carrying a tray with 4 squat, mismatched glasses. He placed 3 in front of Parvel and his companions, and 1 in front of the maiden. She reached into a pouch on her belt and removed a dented flask that looked like it had survived a war. Maybe it had. She poured the glass's contents into the flask and raised it.
To the dead, yours and mine.
Parvel and Vashir hesitantly raised their glasses. Thalius, meanwhile, had poured the liquid into his own flask, one with a long and narrow lip.
May they rest in peace.
He and Vashir both downed their drinks just as one would expect. The maiden reached across her chest and unlatched a panel just beneath her collarbone, thin, seamless, almost invisible, until it opened with a quiet click. Beneath it, a small recess extended outward like a mechanical tongue, revealing a circular port ringed with micro-tubes and tiny blinking lights. Without ceremony, she poured the liquor, dark and oily, into the port. The liquid hissed faintly as it met internal machinery, vaporizing almost instantly. And Thalius brought his flask to a port on the side of his neck, which slid open to reveal an intake valve. He aligned his flask with the valve and poured the liquid in. Parvel felt a little odd about the whole ordeal. Somehow, drinking through his mouth made him feel like a freak in this room of cyborgs. When the drinks had settled back on the table, the maiden folded her hands atop its surface and regarded Parvel with those eyes.
Now to business. While Jubal did act without my knowledge, he is still one of my own. Tell me, if I were to hand him over to you, what would happen to him?
Well, I'd take him into custody and transport him to Dimtraksha, where he'll stand trial in front of a Frun-Sha court.
Her gaze drifted to Fetter's coffin sitting lifelessly on the floor.
And what sort of punishments do your people reserve for thieves and murderers?
I won't lie to you, maiden. Jubal is most likely to suffer the same fate as Fetter. He killed 2 of my soldiers. Soldiers with families that will want justice.
I feared as much. I'm sorry to say that I won't hand him over then.
You realize I can't accept that answer. If you won't hand him over, then I'll have to take him by force. Do you really want that? To put all your other tortured souls at risk for one man?
The maiden leaned back in her chair and brushed her fingers against the table.
Are you familiar with the history of the tortured souls, Commander?
He shrugged.
Only somewhat. You were experiments?
She nodded.
Aye. The Lockdang abducted us from our colony about 30 years to date. Those early days after the long 87 ended, Earth and a few of her colonies had been liberated, but ours was one of the many that still suffered under their rule.
Her voice was steady, yet the slightest tremor in it betrayed something deeper, something personal.
As I'm sure you can imagine, when Earth rebelled, the punishment laid at the feet of all humans. Can't really blame the bastards, though. We were all part of one resistance cell or another back then, all of us scrambling for an edge. My cell was hoping to find one in physical augmentations, specifically cybernetics. We were a factory world after all. Replacing limbs wasn't uncommon.
And the Lockdang discovered your cell, didn't they? I know how this goes.
They sicked their Ausma dogs on us under cover of night, killing and maiming all who resisted. I was at death's door, my blood soaked into the dirt beneath me. They dragged me, moaning and twitching, to their ship.
Her hands balled into fists.
I was terrified.
I didn't want to die. So when they came to me and offered to save my life in exchange for information, I told them everything. Locations of other resistance cells, refuges where we hid psionically gifted humans, all of our cybernetic research. I didn't care. I just wanted to live.
Her eyes met Parvel's, the intense synthetic glow somehow conveying her desperation.
They kept their promise. They stripped me bare, sawed down my limbs, and removed the organs that had been destroyed. When I awoke in my new body, the way I felt, I would have cried tears of gratitude if it were still possible.
Parvel leaned in, his voice more curious than confrontational.
What about the others? Elaine, Fetter, Jubal.
They were the ones I sold out to save myself. Resistance members, scions in hiding. The Lockdang felt they deserved punishment for their defiance. So they used our own cybernetic research against them. They turned my people into tools of labor.
There it was, the guilt.
Their augmentations caused many of them to go mad. They weren't given the same care as me. Probably my reward for being so cooperative.
She paused a moment, as if letting the weight of it all settle.
I traded their lives for my own. My people, my tortured souls.
But you saved them in the end.
She looked toward the wall behind him, as if seeing through it.
I came back for them. When the Lockdang were being driven from our planet, their facilities collapsed into chaos. I used the access they'd given me, security overrides, internal maps, to free them. After years of silence, I stood with them once more to fight against our old enemy, but it would never erase the torment I had inflicted upon them.
That's clearly not how they see it. They practically worship you.
They call me a prophet, but I never encouraged it. I wanted to fix them. I still do. Every spare credit, every risk I take, it all goes towards securing parts, medical equipment, nanite cultures, anything I can use to slow their decay. Most of them, the ones like Elaine, they're too far gone. The few that still remain lucid, they won't escape it forever. Their minds will deteriorate all the same in time. They need me. If I leave them, no one else will care. Not the Alliance, not the UC, not even Libertalia. This galaxy isn't kind to the broken.
Her gaze turned to the coffin.
Do you understand? I can't turn Jubal over. I can't turn any of them over. I've done it once before and I'll never do it again.
Parvel leaned back in his chair, feeling the heaviness of her words settle like dust on old bones. The Iron Maiden wasn't bluffing. He recognized that rare, dangerous clarity in her voice, the certainty of someone who'd already decided what they were willing to die for. He glanced at Thalius, whose motionless gaze betrayed nothing, then at Vashir, whose fingers twitched near his sidearm. Parvel exhaled slowly.
I appreciate your honesty, Maiden, but you know I can't just walk away empty-handed.
The Iron Maiden regarded him for a moment.
Then let me offer something else. Compensation for the damages and the stolen weapons.
Compensation? You want to bribe your man's way out of punishment?
The Iron Maiden didn't flinch. She turned to Vashir, her tone razor-sharp but calm.
No, I'm seeking a compromise to avoid conflict.
Vashir snarled, but Parvel raised a hand to keep him at bay.
Forgive Vashir. His talents are better suited on the battlefield. But I agree with his sentiment. I can't go back to Dimtraksha and tell my superiors we let a murderer walk in exchange for a few credits. He's still accountable for his actions.
But what if you returned with a bounty of Lockdang artifacts in his stead? I've heard whispers that your DMAT's been paying through the roof for some of those shiny toys.
Parvel's eyes narrowed, the weight of the offer rolling around in his head like a stone in a basin. He leaned forward, elbows braced against the table, voice low and measured.
You're suggesting we trade a murderer for trinkets?
The Iron Maiden tilted her head slightly.
I'm offering you what your superiors truly want. You think they sent you to Terminus to play border guard? No, Commander. They sent you here to find leverage, to root out threats, to dig up something useful.
She gestured subtly toward the coffin.
Did Fetter tell you of his vision?
Parvel nodded.
He did.
Jubal confessed to me after you took Fetter into custody. Their actions were reckless, but their visions weren't wrong. There's a pirate captain, the Bonnet, one of the first settlers of Terminus. He discovered a Lockdang archive right here before it became the Hollow Market. Countless data units filled with their knowledge of genetic manipulation. He keeps it all as a personal collection locked away in a vault.
Parvel stirred slightly.
That's a dangerous precedent you're setting, Maiden. Trading justice for knowledge.
I'm not setting anything. I'm compromising. All I ask in return is Jubal's safety and the chance to cure his deteriorating mental state, assuming the artifacts contain such knowledge.
Vashir made a sound between a scoff and a growl, but this time, Parvel didn't silence him. He wanted the sound to linger. Let her know they weren't swayed so easily. He stood and paced a few feet from the table, arms folded, thinking. The Iron Maiden watched him closely, her expression unreadable behind the delicate etching of her mask.
You're not a fool, Commander. Imagine what it would mean for you to return with a treasure trove of recovered Lockdang knowledge. You'd be heralded as a hero.
Parvel halted, staring at the glow of a flickering neon sign behind her.
You presume much.
I observe much. You've held your men in check. You've shown an aptitude for negotiation, restraint, diplomacy. That's not the act of a simple enforcer. That's someone calculating their next move in a larger game.
Thalius shifted in his seat, but didn't speak. His silence was thunderous in its own way. Parvel turned slowly to face her again.
Let's say I help you retrieve this archive, and you hand over the artifacts. What guarantee do I have that Jubal won't cause another incident?
The Iron Maiden clasped her hands together.
A fair question. He does deserve punishment for raiding your depot, this I agree with. So I'll promise you this. Once the archive is retrieved, and if we can glean from it a way to cure my tortured souls, then I will exile Jubal from Terminus. He'll never be allowed within my reach again. I will not shelter him, and I will personally sever him from the tortured souls.
Bashir barked a laugh.
You expect us to believe you'd banish him? One of your so-called children?
The maiden's head dipped slightly, solemn.
If the choice is between his exile or his execution, then yes, I will see him exiled.
Parvel was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to Thalius.
I'd hear your thoughts.
If she keeps her word, then 'tis a strong compromise. But ultimately, as the wronged party, the price of Jubal's crimes should be weighed by you alone.
Parvel returned to his chair and sat slowly, eyes locking with the maiden's once more. She leaned forward now, the light catching faint scratches on her metal cheek.
We just need you to join us for the raid. Your soldiers, my souls, together. The Bonnet's hold is formidable, and you'll need my access to navigate the vault. But if we do this right, none of us need to kill each other.
Parvel looked to Vashir. The Olgek's brow was furrowed, his jaw tight.
I don't like letting a murderer walk, but it's your call, sir.
His eyes went back to the maiden, and after a moment of deliberation, he spoke.
I'll need to talk to the demon about this first.
The maiden gave a curt half-nod.
Of course.
Parvel rose once more.
We'll contact you when we have our answer.
He gestured for his men to follow as he led them out of the tavern and into the tunnels of the Hollow Market.
This is insane. You realize that, right? We're about to team up with machine cultists to rob a pirate lord in exchange for letting a murderer walk.
I know. We need to keep an eye on them.
He turned to the mechanical knight.
Thalius, I want you to follow them, discreetly. See if you can find out where they're keeping Jubal.
Are you planning to double-cross them?
Only if they do it first, but I'm hoping it won't come to that.
Thalius nodded.
Very well. Go on ahead then. I'll remain here and watch them from a distance.
He soon disappeared into the shadowy background, while Parvel led his retinue back through the winding arteries of the Hollow Market. This isn't at all what he had in mind when he thought to set up this meeting. While it was true that he wanted to avoid bloodshed, he also wanted to actually arrest and prosecute the man who murdered his people. As he emerged from the underground hollow, he took a breath of fresh air, closed his eyes, and prayed he was making the right choices. The Communion Temple bloomed into view long before the city. Much like Libera Civitate, the gargantuan alien temple sat at the very center of Dimtraksha. The Frun-Sha had clearly built their capital on top of old Lockdang structures, if the steel spikes rising into the air were any indication. As the shuttle descended into the city's designated docking quadrant, Beth leaned forward in her crash couch, watching the spires pass underfoot. Her grip on the seat's arm tightened as the landing gear scraped against the docking clamps with a jolt. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom once more to announce that they were free to disembark. The four of them stepped onto the landing platform and found themselves in a world drowned in steel. Walkways crisscrossed above them, threading between towering structures of hybridized design. The shadows of patrolling drones zipped overhead, and each of the four felt their presence sweep over them like an invisible scan. Beth resisted the urge to flinch. Liz's posture was casual, but her eyes flicked constantly between corners and rooftops. Lucas looked strangely calm, as if the tension in the air only grounded him further. Arcade kept a hand near the sidearm in his holster. They had a destination in mind. Morag had claimed the temple itself as his residence. Their hope was that they could just waltz on in and request an audience with Morag. Not a very eloquent plan, but they weren't trying to be inconspicuous right now. But as they approached the outer perimeter of the Communion Temple, it became immediately apparent that something was wrong. The wide plaza that circled the temple was nearly empty. A heavy, rhythmic hum echoed across the area, the unmistakable sound of a high-grade energy field. Beth's eyes shot upward. A faint shimmer traced the air around the entire temple, like a soap bubble barely visible against the sky. This wasn't the protective barrier Drennick had mentioned. It was something independent of the temple. Liz stepped forward, tilting her head to one side as she studied the shimmer.
Guess he doesn't want visitors.
They stood in silence, staring at the shimmering dome. A few civilians passed at a distance, pointedly avoiding the plaza without sparing the barrier a second glance. Clearly, this wasn't a new fixture. Lucas released a deflated sigh as he bowed his head.
That's just lovely. Think we can find another way in?
There's gotta be some way to get his attention.
Can't we just find a patrol? Tell them we're envoys from Libertalia or something?
They didn't have to go far. A Frun-Sha patrol was making their rounds nearby, each bearing the crimson insignia of Clan Morag across their chests. The group approached them, earning curious looks from the armored soldiers.
Excuse me, is there any way we could gain access to the temple?
The patrol's leader, a towering Olgek, remained guarded, but polite.
I'm sorry, sir, but the DMAT has denied access to everyone until further notice.
But we're envoys. We were told Morag was expecting us.
The Olgek narrowed his eyes.
I wasn't informed of this.
Then someone's not doing their job, because we traveled a long way, and we were told there would be a hefty reward for delivering a certain lockdown artifact.
The Olgek's eyes widened in realization.
Ah, I see.
You'll let us in then?
Unfortunately, sir, I don't have authorization, but I'll contact...
His expression soured and he spat his next words.
Someone who does.
He tapped his Vic and spoke to someone on the other end. The conversation was brief, and nothing could be heard from the other party. He turned his attention back to the group and ushered them around the shield's perimeter. They were halted at a metal structure, acting as a checkpoint to get into the barrier. They waited a few minutes before the door opened, and the entity that stepped out drew silent gasps from the group. He was a tall and slender humanoid alien with pearl-white skin and bright purple eyes, wearing an elegant set of red and gold robes. Beth had felt his psionic presence even before he opened the door. So much energy funneled into one being. There was only one person this could be. Mermel, Drennick's brother. He stared at the group with a look of annoyance.
So let me get this straight. You took one look at the enormous energy field and thought, oh, the demon must be taking visitors.
His tone could easily be described as snooty, arrogant. Beth crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed.
Surely someone in your esteemed position can recognize diplomatic envoys when he sees them.
Mermil scoffed, stepping further into view. Up close, he was impossibly pristine. Not a speck of dust or wrinkle on his robes.
Envoys, are you?
His gaze drifted to Liz and Arcade.
You two have the distinct musk of soldier.
He then turned to Lucas.
Your mind clings desperately to something. The need to fix everything.
His gaze sharpened as he leaned down to match Beth's eye level.
And you're a real walking disaster, aren't you? Wherever you go, chaos seems to follow. No wonder your father left you and your mother didn't fight to keep you around.
Beth's eyes narrowed, her fists clenching at her side as silent, taut fury built up inside of her.
We have the astral cage, you fucking jackass.
Lucas held up a hand to defuse her.
Beth!
And your brother!
Mirmil froze. The air between them shifted, growing colder, sharper. His amused disdain evaporated in an instant, replaced by something far more dangerous. Interest. He straightened slowly, regal posture resuming like a curtain being drawn back into place.
You freed Drennick from captivity.
Beth took a half step back, suddenly realizing the magnitude of what she'd said. She swallowed a lump in her throat.
Yes.
Mirmal's eyes bore into hers.
How did you?
He tilted his head and Beth noticed something. The flickering light in the purple of his eyes.
Oh. So Zalma's little pet massacred Armillaria did it? Oh my. What a mess she's made of things.
Beth recognized what was happening and immediately broke eye contact with him.
If you want to know where the astral cage is, you'll take us to Morig.
Mirmal turned his head away from the group, looking like he was working something out in his mind. He then rolled his eyes with an exaggerated sigh.
Very well. I suppose the Demit will wish to hear this.
He turned his back on them.
Follow me.
The patrol leader gestured silently to the group as he followed behind them. They stepped into the checkpoint's airlock, and as they passed through the threshold, they felt a tingling sensation on their skin. As they trekked along, Mirmal felt the need to continue running his mouth.
I do hope you're aware of the monumental privilege I'm granting you right now.
They walked through the short corridor and exited to the plaza on the other side. Mirmal led them in silence, each step slow and deliberate, as if savoring the sound of their footfalls against the polished stone. The Frun-Sha patrol followed close behind, weapons slung but hands twitching. When they were about halfway to the tower, in the middle of the plaza, Mirmal stopped, and the rest of the group halted behind him.
Go ahead and drink in the splendor while we wait for my retinue to arrive. Being this close to the Temple of the Luhaf is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Liz and Arcade nervously glanced at one another.
Doesn't feel very welcoming.
Mirmal didn't turn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
His gaze remained fixed on the enormous spires of the temple as he folded his hands behind his back.
Here I was trying to highlight the grand spectacle before you, this absolute marvel of technology in its most unconstrained form. I wouldn't have tried if I knew you were going to be so boring about it.
As Mirmal finished his sentence, several figures emerged from the temple's entrance. There were 8 of them by Beth's count, tall, broad-shouldered Frun-Sha enforcers clad in plate armor and armed to the teeth. Mirmal's posture didn't shift an inch as the enforcers approached. The heavy thud of their boots echoed ominously across the empty plaza. Lucas subtly angled his body to keep Beth and Liz in his periphery, his hand brushing against the grip of his sidearm. The enforcers surrounded them on all sides, and Mirmal watched them with predatory glee.
Now then, hand over your weapons.
The 4 envoys shared an uneasy glance, but Lucas slowly raised his hands.
All right, take it easy. We're in their house. Let's play by their rules.
Reluctantly, the group began to unclip their weapons and pass them to the nearest enforcer. Beth was the last to surrender hers, holding onto the grip a second longer than necessary. The Frun-Sha enforcer gave her a hard stare as he took it.
Wonderful,
Mirmal said with a soft clap, and with a lazy wave of his hand said,
Arrest them.
The words hit like a shockwave.
What?
Liz barked, stepping instinctively in front of Beth.
You said we'd be granted an audience.
Oh, I did,
Mirmal said breezily with a small shrug.
But here's the thing. You think holding the astral cage will give you some kind of bargaining power against the Demit. So instead of wasting his time with negotiations, you're going to tell me where I can find it.
Arcade lunged forward, but 2 enforcers were on him in an instant, slamming him to the ground. One planted a knee in his back, while the other secured thick magnetic cuffs around his wrists. Beth and Liz were grabbed next, rough hands yanking their arms behind their backs. Lucas didn't resist as his own cuffs locked into place, but his eyes stayed locked on Mirmal with a cold fury.
You're making a mistake,
Lucas said, voice low, controlled, dangerous. Mirmal's grin widened as he leaned down to look Lucas in the eyes.
Really? You thought you could strut into my home, dangle my kin like bait, and expect a warm welcome? No. You're going to be interrogated, thoroughly, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it.
Beth, still struggling against the guard holding her, barked.
You're just a lapdog. How do you think Morig will feel when he finds out you ruined his chance at immortality?
The guards from the patrol outside shared a confused look. Mirmal inclined his head toward her, her biting remark seeming to annoy him a little.
You're quite a bold one, aren't you? You must be the type who loves to hear herself prattle on and on without end.
Beth sneered at him.
Look who's talking, asshole.
Mermil chuckled at her words, holding up his hands in feigned fear.
Oh, you've got some bark, little girl.
She fixed him with a death glare.
Let me off my leash and I'll show you my bite.
Beth,
Lucas said disapprovingly. But Mermil tilted his head, clearly intrigued by her words.
Well then.
He leaned forward, locking eyes with her.
Lady Beth, you've got my attention.
He stood upright and snatched Beth's weapon from the hands of the Frun-Sha soldier that had restrained her. He turned the weapon over in his hands with a delicate, almost reverent grace, as if appraising a priceless work of art.
You can tell a lot about a person by the kind of weapon they carry, and even more by the way they use it.
Beth said nothing. Her shoulders were tense, jaw tight. The guards still held her arms behind her back, but her eyes never left the weapon. Then, Mermil looked at the guard.
Release her.
The guard did as he was told without hesitation, and Mermil shoved the handgun into her chest. She grabbed onto it awkwardly, stumbling slightly as Mermil shoved her off balance. She stared at him in disbelief. His eyes remained locked onto hers, the smile never leaving his face.
Go on, show me what kind of bite you have.
Beth narrowed her eyes skeptically.
What are you playing at?
Mermil just widened his arms and took a few steps back.
I'll give you one chance. If you can kill me before I disarm you, then I'll take you to morgue. My brother did mention that we come back after death, right?
Beth's eyes flicked to Lucas, then to the others, but their expressions offered no answers. Her grip tightened around the weapon, her pulse thudding in her ears. Mermil just stood there, posture loose and smug as ever, like he was inviting a breeze to try and knock him down.
No tricks, no intervention from the guards. Just you and me.
Beth's gaze hardened.
You're fucking insane.
Come now, don't be a bore. Go on and prove to everyone that you're more than just a squawking child.
The plaza fell utterly silent. Even the enforcers were still. Beth took a breath, in then out. She raised her weapon and pointed it at Mermil. Center mass. That's what instinct told her. That's where she'd aim. But every part of her screamed, this was a trap. This was a man who had been given the power of infinite lifespans, who toyed with life and death like it was a parlor trick. And then she fired. The report of the gun cracked through the open plaza. A pulse of recoil jumped through her arms as she fired again. Once, twice, center mass and headshot. Clean, precise. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. But the bullets stopped. Each round froze in midair a hair's breadth from Mermil's face, suspended as though caught in a pane of invisible glass. Time itself seemed to bend around him. Ripples in the air shimmered like heat waves, distorting the path of her attack. Mermil blinked slowly, still smiling, and the bullets dropped harmlessly to the ground with a soft, metallic clatter. After her initial shock, Beth took aim once more but didn't get the chance to fire as Mermil moved at unnatural speed and grabbed onto the forearm that held her weapon.
That's the thing about threats. They're only useful when you can back them up.
He yanked the weapon from her, then raised one hand and made a small, twisting motion. Beth screamed as she was violently yanked off her feet and slammed to the stone floor. Lucas shouted her name, but he was held fast. Mermil stood over her mockingly as he inspected her weapon.
That was astronomically disappointing.
He casually disassembled the handgun, magazine out, slide apart, pieces floating briefly before collapsing into a neat pile at his feet. Enraged by his taunting, Beth lunged at him, no plan in mind but to do something, and was immediately caught in a telekinetic grip that froze her mid-motion. Her body trembled with effort, struggling against invisible chains, as Mermil closed the distance with the leisurely gait of a man out for a morning stroll.
I have to say, Lady Beth, I am profoundly unimpressed.
He released her without warning, letting her crumple into the dirt on her stomach.
You should probably stay down.
What is happening out here?
A new voice echoed throughout the plaza. All heads turned toward the temple entrance, where an imposing man wearing an armored vest stood with an air of authority. His eyes were locked onto Mermil, waiting for an explanation that he knew he wouldn't like. Mermil sighed in frustration and murmured something under his breath. He then turned his head only slightly towards the man, deliberately offering him as little attention as possible.
Nothing to concern yourself with, Reverend Killjoy. I'm just dealing with some vermin. You can go back to doing whatever it is you do.
The man's gaze swept over the crowd and stopped when it landed on Lucas.
Do you know who this is?
Yes, Vernon, as stated previously.
The man gestured to Beth's uncle.
That is Lucas Weber, one of the most influential men in Libertalia.
He then turned to look at Beth, who'd managed to crawl onto one knee.
And if I'm not mistaken, that's his niece.
His eyes went back to Murmel.
Covered in dirt and bruised by your hand.
Murmel spared a glance at Beth and Lucas before turning fully to face the man.
Well, how very good for them.
The man's expression soured.
You think it's acceptable to assault dignitaries?
Murmel grasped at his chest in faux offense.
You mistake me for some sort of scoundrel. These dignitaries have stolen the astral cage and have freed my brother from captivity.
Beth strained to stand, but only stumbled back onto her knee.
We came to offer a deal to Morig, but he threatened to torture us instead.
The man was near seething now.
That ego of yours is going to cost us everything.
Murmel scoffed.
I'm sorry. Cost us everything? Don't let that new promotion go to your head. You're still a guppy in this pond.
The man didn't back down. On the contrary, he stepped into Murmel's personal space, showing no signs of intimidation, even with the glaring height difference.
Dealing with envoys under any capacity falls under my duties. You wouldn't want the Demon to find out his guest didn't make it to dinner this evening because you chose to undermine my authority, would you?
Murmel's expression twisted into something sharper, less theatrical, more real. His eyes, previously filled with smug amusement, now shimmered with restrained contempt.
And when, pray tell, were they scheduled to join the Demon for dinner?
The man tapped his Vic.
Just now.
The tension between them crackled like a live wire. Even the enforcers had gone still, uncertain of where loyalty lay in that moment. Like a breath too loud might have been enough to set Murmel off again. But instead, Murmel lifted his nose at the man and looked down on him, and with a heavy breath came an exaggerated smile.
Well, far be it from me to disappoint the Demon.
He turned to the rest of the group and did a theatrical bow.
Welcome to the Temple of the Luhoff, our most esteemed guests.
The man shook his head at Murmel's pageantry and stepped forward to address the guards.
Is this how you honor Clan Morig and the Frun-Sha? Release them!
They wasted no time following his command. Lucas and Arcade had their wrist restraints removed, and the guard holding Liz loosened his grip. Beth, still reeling from her scuffle with Murmel, wiped the dirt and grime from her face. The man noticed her out of the corner of his eye and moved toward her. He offered a hand and an apologetic look. Beth hesitated for only a heartbeat before taking it. Up close, she could see the faint outline of old scars along his jaw. This wasn't a bureaucrat who sat behind a desk all day.
Beth Meyer. It's good to finally put a face to the name. This meeting has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Beth regarded him with confusion.
Has it?
He nodded.
Perhaps Logan mentioned me before you stole his artifact.
Beth's eyes widened.
Hesh?
He nodded again, his chest rising with a silent chuckle.
Looks like the old man finally got what he wanted. You know, he was fuming after you escaped Etheria.
Beth's jaw tightened.
Good.
The loud clap of Murmel's hands drew their attention to him.
Well, now that you two have made fast friends, I'll be taking my leave. I have important matters that need attending.
Hesh narrowed his eyes at the Parlin.
Next time, I would advise you don't think yourself above accountability. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak, for by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned.
Murmel scoffed.
Don't quote your scripture to me, you religious troglodyte.
He then turned on his heel and left them to enter the temple. Hesh exhaled slowly as Murmel disappeared into the vaulted shadows, his footsteps echoing with every smug stride.
I apologize for the way he treated you,
he said, turning back to the group.
His most fluent language is cruelty.
What's there to apologize for?
Liz muttered sarcastically while rubbing her wrist.
He's quite the charmer.
Arcade winced as he rolled his shoulders.
Is that how he treats most people he meets?
He would if there was no one around to stop him. He's more interested in feeding his own ego than anything else.
Lucas stepped forward.
We're grateful for the intervention. I wasn't expecting the red carpet or anything, but I didn't think things would get that heated that fast.
Hesh nodded.
I can't blame you for that. No one's ever truly prepared to meet Mermel for the first time.
He looked over Lucas's shoulder at the 3 patrolmen from earlier.
What are you still doing here, Lieutenant? Get back to your patrol.
The Olgek awkwardly cleared his throat and gave a reluctant but respectful bow.
Of course. Sorry, sir.
He led his men back to the airlock, while Mermel's so-called retinue remained in place.
That's enough gawking from the rest of you. Get back to your posts.
The enforcers dispersed quickly, clearly used to obeying Hesch's commands. A few cast backward glances at the group, but none dared linger long under his scrutiny. The air began to settle, the tension slowly bleeding out of the plaza like water from a cracked basin. Beth flexed her fingers, still feeling the ghost of Mermil's telekinetic grip lingering on her. She caught Lucas watching her, concern painting his face.
Are you all right?
Beth nodded.
Some lingering pain, but I'll walk it off.
Lucas met her eyes with a tired glare.
You shouldn't have run your mouth like that. He could have done a lot worse to you.
Beth didn't reply. Hesch motioned for them to follow him.
Come, I'll take you to your quarters.
Beth raised a curious brow.
Quarters?
Hesch gave a wry smile as he led them toward the temple.
The Demon won't be able to receive you until this evening. We can hardly expect you to wait in the plaza, can we?
The group followed Hesch through the towering entrance of the Communion Temple, its immense doors sealing shut behind them with a heavy clang. Inside, the air was charged with the static of psionic energy and the low hum of dormant power. The interior looked like a Gothic cathedral built from melting obsidian. Towering archways of some kind of black material curved overhead, pulsing softly with violet lines that branched like veins beneath their surfaces. The corridor opened into a circular atrium, vast and bathed in pale light, pouring from a massive fixture high above. Huge columns supported the ceiling, each etched with glyphs that shimmered faintly. The group paused for a moment to take it in. A pair of attendants approached from the far end, dressed in fancy, fashionable attire. When they closed the distance, they offered Beth and the others small data chips that fit in their palms and gestured toward separate corridors that split off from the atrium like spokes on a wheel.
Keys to your rooms. Get yourselves cleaned up, and a servant will come by to take your measurements.
Beth blinked.
Measurements?
Hesch's lips curved into a polite but knowing smile.
You'll need proper attire if you're to dine with the Demon in the Great Hall.
Arcade folded his arms.
You want us to dress up for him?
First impressions matter. Do you think it'll be better to negotiate dressed in that grimy armor?
Beth looked down at herself. Dirt-streaked, blood on her sleeve, hair half matted to her forehead.
I guess a change of clothes couldn't hurt.
Hesch nodded.
Rest assured you're our guests here, and will be treated with the civility befitting of such.
They each took their respective chips, and Hesch gestured toward the corridors.
Pick a hallway and hold the chip up to the glyph on the door.
Beth opted for the leftmost corridor. Her body ached, and the echo of every step she took reverberated in her head like a drumbeat. She stopped in front of a door where a glowing glyph, shaped like a spiral of branching lines, shimmered faintly. Holding the chip up to it, the light pulsed once, then the door slid open with a soft sigh. The room beyond was unexpected. Soft, ambient lighting cascaded from the walls themselves, with no visible fixtures, and the air was warm but crisp, filled with a subtle scent of incense. The floor was a dark, plush fabric that muffled her boots. A bed large enough to fit 3 people sat centered against the far wall, draped in rich crimson and gold sheets. In one corner, a vanity embedded seamlessly into the wall sat next to a curtain leading into a small washroom. Beth stepped in cautiously, inspecting the details of the room, wondering if someone was watching her from some unseen camera. She wandered to the mirror, bracing her arms against its frame. The woman staring back at her looked rough, dirt-smudged skin, a split in her lip, hair slightly disheveled. Her eyes trailed over to the little washroom, and she couldn't help but draw parallels to her first day in Libertalia. She exhaled and peeled off her armor as she headed for the tub. If she was going to spend her time sulking, better to do it clean. Her door rang with a melodic chime. After her bath, a servant had come by with some kind of tailor drone to scan her. She was grateful for how quick and non-invasive it was. Only about 20 minutes had passed since then. This time, when she answered the door, she was greeted by a young woman with a kind smile wearing a formal, long-sleeved gown. In her small hands, she held a neatly folded gown of similar make. Accompanying the woman was another one of those drones she had seen earlier. With a polite bow, the woman said,
"I've brought your dress, milady."
Beth accepted it with an uncomfortable smile and a quiet thanks. The woman nodded in acknowledgement.
"Would you like me to help you with your hair and makeup, my lady?"
Beth stared at the woman for a few seconds of bewildered silence. Her first instinct was to refuse. She had no desire to be powdered and pinned like an ornament. But at the same time, she recognized that she wasn't exactly in her element. She drew a steadying breath and loosened her tense shoulders.
What did you have in mind?
The woman's smile deepened.
"Something simple and dignified. Perhaps a braid and a little color on your cheeks to highlight your soft features."
Beth absent-mindedly pulled her hair over her shoulder and gave it a few strokes.
"Sure, why not?"
Her smile only grew.
"Very good, my lady."
She nodded to the room.
"May I?"
Beth stepped aside, granting the woman entrance with a nod of her own.
"Yeah, come on in."
The woman entered gracefully, followed closely by the drone.
"Go ahead and put on your gown first. See how it fits."
Beth retreated behind the curtain that led to the washroom. She slipped out of the loose casual wear she had changed into after her shower and with careful fingers eased herself into the gown. The fabric slid over her skin like water, cool and smooth, hugging her frame without clinging uncomfortably. She fastened the hidden clasps and adjusted the sleeves, which were fitted at the shoulders and wrists. When she stepped out from behind the screen, the woman's face lit up in approval.
"Exquisite."
She walked over to the vanity and pulled out the chair.
"Please have a seat, milady."
Beth eased herself into the cushioned stool near the mirror as the drone floated closer, emitting a soft chime.
"You can call me Beth. I'm not some noble woman."
The woman gently gathered a few brushes and small containers from a hidden compartment in the drone's side.
"As you wish, Lady Beth."
Beth chuckled under her breath.
"No, just Beth."
She halted when she turned to the woman and saw her amused smirk. Then Beth gave her a wry smile.
"Is it common for the servants to be so cheeky with guests?"
The woman dipped her head just slightly, the mirth in her eyes undiminished.
"You seem like someone who appreciates levity."
Beth sighed, letting her shoulders sink further.
"You're not wrong."
The drone hovered silently nearby, projecting a soft light onto her face. The woman began by brushing out her hair with long, practiced strokes, her movements deft and gentle.
"You're very brave,"
she said softly, a compliment so casual it almost felt like an afterthought. Beth arched a brow.
"Why do you say that?"
"Everyone's talking about the scene you made in the courtyard. Not many people are willing to stand up to Murmel."
The woman's hands were skilled, weaving Beth's hair into a smooth, elegant braid that wrapped around the crown of her head before trailing down one shoulder. Beth tilted her head lightly, allowing her to work.
"Does he treat the servants like that too?"
The woman offered a gentle smile.
"Nothing as dramatic as what you experienced, though he does act with an air of superiority."
"Must make working here a delight."
The woman gave a small, dry laugh.
"He knows better than to cross the Demet's concubines."
Beth met the woman's gaze in the mirror, this time making sure to truly study her features. She was young, though maybe not as young as Beth, and pretty. There was confidence there, quiet, but unmistakable. Now Beth was wondering just how many layers of intrigue were hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly disarming woman.
"You're one of Morig's."
The woman's hands didn't pause as she reached for a small brush and began applying a light shimmer to Beth's cheeks.
"I am. His lover, his advisor."
"His spy?"
The woman paused for a beat before chuckling softly.
"You'd make an excellent concubine. Sharp tongue, sharp wit, radiant beauty."
Beth snorted.
"No thanks."
Beth studied her reflection in the mirror. The braid was impeccable, elegant without being ostentatious, and the makeup, while subtle, brought a warmth to her face that softened the bruising along her jaw.
"How long have you known him?"
Beth asked, testing the waters. The woman reached for a thin silver pin, sliding it into the braid with practiced ease.
"Long enough. He's a reflection of the world he came from."
Beth's chest tightened. The weight behind those words weren't lost on her. She thought again of Lucas's account of the jar and what the Lockdang did to their oceans.
"I take it you know about the whole immortality thing then?"
The woman's hands stilled for a moment, just long enough to suggest she was choosing her words carefully. Then she resumed her delicate work, gathering the last few strands of Beth's hair and pinning them neatly into place.
I know as much as he does,
she said finally, her tone softer now, almost somber. Beth held her breath for a second, then let it out slowly.
Does that mean you support it?
The woman met her eyes in the mirror again. There was something there, something old and tired, hiding behind her carefully composed mask.
I support him.
Why?
Another small pause.
Do you fear death? What would you do to stave it off for just a little while longer?
Beth hesitated, her gaze locking onto her own reflection as the woman's question lingered.
I don't know. I've come close enough to it a few times now to realize how much I still want to live. But fear it? I'm not sure. Maybe I just fear what it'll do to
She bit back her words.
To the people I care about, leaving them behind to carry on without me.
The woman nodded slowly, folding her hands in her lap now that her work was complete.
There was a time when I had a brush with death. I stared into the cold, dark void, and I was terrified.
Beth turned in her seat.
What happened?
The woman's eyes flicked down toward the floor, her confidence momentarily softened by something weightier, more intimate.
Their fleet attacked my vessel. We didn't stand a chance. They could have destroyed our ship, but instead they boarded us. Half the crew had already been killed from the attack, some of them jettisoned straight into space when the hull was torn apart. A bunch of soldiers came aboard and forced us onto our knees in a line. We sat there in tense silence for a few minutes, wondering what they were going to do to us.
She took a shuddering breath.
And then he came aboard.
Beth leaned forward slightly, drawn in despite herself.
Morrig?
The woman nodded.
He was larger than life. The authority he commanded was indescribable. His eyes swept across us and stopped when they landed on me. He kneeled down and looked me square in the face, and he asked me that same question. Do you fear death?
Beth felt her spine straighten instinctively, some mix of sympathy and unease knotting in her stomach.
How did you respond?
I didn't answer.
The woman's voice had softened into something almost reverent.
I couldn't. I was trembling. I could barely breathe. But he didn't seem to mind. He told us if we swore to serve him, we could stave off death for just a little while longer.
Did anyone refuse?
Just one man. They slit his throat and threw him out the airlock.
Beth swallowed hard, feeling the room tilt slightly around her. The woman's words weren't spoken with malice, nor with sorrow. They were delivered with a calm acceptance, like someone recounting the inevitable turning of seasons. It was hard to tell whether Beth was more disturbed by the story or the conviction in the woman's voice. She couldn't help but wonder how many others Morrig had spared in the same way, how many lives he'd plucked from the edge just to mold them into something new, something his. Beth looked down at her hands in her lap, now clean, soft, foreign-looking against the silky material of her borrowed gown. No, not borrowed. Tailor-made for her, and her alone.
And you've been with him ever since?
I've had opportunities to leave, but I never took them.
Beth nodded slowly.
Why me?
The question had escaped her lips before she realized she was asking it. The woman's brow furrowed slightly.
I'm not sure I understand.
Why are you telling me all this? Why the honesty, the vulnerability? Is this just part of the routine? Soften up the guest, dress her up, make her forget what she's walking into?
For the first time, the woman looked genuinely taken aback. She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze fell to the floor again, the mask slipping just another hair.
I suppose I saw something familiar in you. That stubborn spark, that fear you won't admit. I believe you're a kindred spirit, Lady Beth.
Beth leaned back slightly in her seat, her heart thudding from the weight of the woman's words. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, that the woman believed they were alike, or that a part of Beth felt it too.
What's your name?
Beth asked after a beat of silence. The woman smiled faintly, as though she had been waiting for the question.
Seren.
Seren. Thank you.
Seren bowed her head slightly, then gestured to the mirror.
Let's have a look at you, shall we?
Beth rose from the stool and stepped in front of the mirror once more. For a few heartbeats, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. The gown draped elegantly over her frame, the braid gleamed like a woven crown of bronze, and the subtle shimmer on her cheeks softened her features. She looked composed, regal almost, like the daughter of a nobleman. Saren, watching her quietly, offered a small, reassuring nod.
What do you think?
Beth squared her shoulders and turned twice to see her profile.
It's very feminine.
Saren chuckled.
Not your usual attire, I take it?
Beth shook her head.
Honestly, I've never even worn a dress before.
Saren's brows lifted slightly in surprise.
Really? That's such a shame. You wear it so well.
Beth smiled in spite of herself. The reflection still felt a little foreign, like slipping into a skin she hadn't grown into yet. But it didn't feel wrong, just distant. Like she was glimpsing a version of herself she hadn't met before. A soft chime from the drone caught the attention of both women.
They're ready for us,
Saren said, her expression shifting back to composed professionalism. Beth squared her shoulders again, feeling the fabric of the gown shift and settle around her.
Guess it's showtime.
Saren led the way to the door and opened it for Beth, allowing her to step out first. The two of them returned to the atrium, where Lucas, Arcade, and Liz were already waiting, all similarly transformed in formal attire. Liz, dressed in a gown that matched Beth's, caught sight of her first.
You look beautiful, Beth.
She practically gushed. Beth flushed, feeling more exposed under Liz's bright smile than she had during the entire process of getting dressed.
Thanks,
she muttered, tugging lightly at the sleeve of her gown as if trying to hide in it.
So do you.
It wasn't an empty compliment by any means. Liz wore her gown with confidence and poise. The blue glow of her ocular implants only seemed to brighten under the dim lighting of the communion temple. Simply put, she looked gorgeous. Arcade and Lucas were also looking prim and proper. Their attire was more military in design, but still just as regal. They held themselves with the discipline one would expect of a soldier, the obvious result of years of military service. Before long, Hesh appeared from one of the side corridors, garbed in a similar formal military uniform. He stopped a few paces away, surveying the group with a discerning eye. A slow, satisfied smile tugged at his lips.
Well done. You actually look the part of emissaries now.
Lucas adjusted the collar of his jacket.
I don't suppose you have any advice or rules for us?
Hesh's smile faded into something more serious.
Show respect. Morig values strength but has no patience for arrogance. Don't grovel, but don't challenge him openly either. He needs to see the utility in what you have to offer. Be practical when negotiating with him.
Anything else?
He'll be the last to arrive. It'll be a private feast with only a few of us attending, and Mermil will be joining us.
Beth instinctively bristled, her hands curling into loose fists at her sides. Liz seemed to catch the tension immediately and shot her a small, warning glance that read, "Keep it together."
I'll ensure he behaves himself,
Hesh said before gesturing to the far side of the atrium.
Now come, it's time.
They followed him down a vaulted corridor, the walls adorned with shimmering murals similar to the ones in Lucas's museum. Beth slowed briefly, her gaze lingering on one depiction of colossal sea creatures breaching crystalline waves. Was this a depiction of a Jar homeworld? The thought tightened her chest. When they reached the end of the corridor, two Frun-Sha guards stood before a massive black door, a holographic glyph buzzing at the center. Without a word, one of them stepped toward the glyph and raised one of those data chips. The glyph pulsed, and the door's mechanisms could be heard as it opened up from the center. The banquet hall beyond was nothing short of breathtaking. An oval table of dark, polished stone dominated the center of the room, carved with intricate inlays that pulsed faintly under the light of hanging crystal orbs. Platters of vibrant food, most of it unrecognizable, adorned the surface. Iridescent fruits, cuts of meat with hues ranging from pale blue to deep red, sauces that shimmered as they caught the light. At least a dozen high-backed chairs encircled the table, though only one was currently occupied. There, lounging with casual arrogance in one of the seats flanking the head of the table, was Mermil. His eyes lit up as he spotted Beth, and his grin was predatory. Mermil rose from his seat with exaggerated grace.
Ah, the honored guests have arrived,
he said, his voice dripping with mock admiration. His gaze lingered on Beth for a beat too long.
My, what a transformation. Careful you don't trip on your feet there, walking disaster.
Beth lifted her chin and met Murmil's gaze.
Mind that you don't swallow your tongue in your attempts at wit, Trinculo.
A low chuckle rumbled from Murmil's throat.
A fellow admirer of the classics. How about instead of walking disaster, I call you Lady Macbeth? That seems far more fitting, wouldn't you agree?
Beth smiled sweetly.
Wow, we have similar names. You're so clever.
Murmil's grin sharpened. For a heartbeat, the smug air around him faltered, as if Beth's jab had struck deeper than he was willing to admit.
Enough, Murmil.
Hesh's voice was firm, cutting cleanly through the tension. He gestured to the table.
Please be seated. The demon will join us shortly.
Beth and her companions moved to the chairs indicated for them, careful to leave the massive seat at the head of the table conspicuously empty. It was more of a throne, really. A young woman stood to one side, her hands clasped neatly in front of her, while Saren flanked the other side. The two of them looked like ornaments set to adorn the demon's throne. Beth found herself seated between Liz and Lucas, with Arcade directly down the line next to Liz. It was a comforting formation. The food on the table smelled strange but not unpleasant. Beth eyed a dish of spiral-cut meat that shimmered faintly under the lights, resisting the urge to poke it suspiciously. Servants began to pour wine into tall, crystalline goblets, from which Murmil sipped lazily, whilst watching them like a cat who'd cornered several mice. Beth's heart thudded in her chest. She sat rigidly, fingers laced together in her lap beneath the table, trying to project an image of calm she didn't entirely feel. It wasn't long before the door at the far end of the room opened again, and the air shifted palpably. The loud thud of his footsteps were what came first. They were unnaturally heavy and had a slight metallic clang to them. His silhouette was almost large enough to cover the entire doorframe. The room was utterly silent as he stepped into the light. His head looked like an octopus with a beard of tentacles squirming around his face. He wore a massive mechanical suit that submerged the tentacled body beneath his neck in water. Most Jar wore something more lean, something designed to give them a less conspicuous humanoid form with some type of clothing draped over the metal suit. Not Morig. His was truly a suit of armor, and he made no effort to hide it. He was a hulking figure, his suit a gunmetal black with massive pauldrons that capped his shoulders. Beth found herself instinctively shrinking back into her seat, even as she forced her posture to remain outwardly composed. Saren and the other woman pulled out his chair at the head of the table as he approached. With a heavy, deliberate motion, he lowered himself into the throne. The servos of his suit whirred and groaned with the effort. For a long moment, he said nothing, simply studying each of them in turn. Lucas, Beth, Liz, Arcade, his sharp orange eyes glowing in the dim light. Morig didn't simply command authority. He was authority. Hesh approached his spot at the table, right next to Murmil.
Demat,
he said with a bow.
I present to you Lucas Weber, Beth Meyer, Elizabeth Liu, and Martinez Santiago.
Morig's gaze lingered a moment longer. Then he spoke, his voice deep and rumbling with a hint of wet sloshiness.
You stole my artifact.
His eyes trailed down to the goblet of wine in front of him. Tentacles began to slither out of his suit, where one would expect hands to be. They wrapped around the goblet and began to swirl the liquid inside.
You stole my prisoner, and now you've arrived at my doorstep seeking to make a deal.
He brought the goblet closer to his face where a funnel protruded out and sucked in the wine like a straw.
Now,
he sat the glass down.
What happened in Armillaria?
Beth could feel every muscle in her body tighten under his gaze, but she forced herself to meet it, steady and unflinching. Her heart hammered in her ears, but she refused to look away. Lucas leaned forward slightly, his voice calm and diplomatic.
Zalma's pet vorlith. It attacked the village. The people were in the process of being assimilated by the time we arrived.
Morig's eyes narrowed.
Elaborate.
The villagers were being transformed, their bodies twisted, remade. The process wasn't complete when we arrived, but there was no saving them. They turned into monsters and attacked us before we could leave. 2 of our people died.
Morag was silent for a long, harrowing moment.
And how did the rest of you escape?
We burned the vorlith's local nucleus.
Morag's eyes lit up with what could vaguely be considered amusement.
Did you now?
He leaned back in his throne, the massive frame of his suit groaning with the shift in weight. His tentacles tapped thoughtfully against the stone armrests.
That's an impressive feat. But why, pray tell, did you decide to come here of all places after you had both the astral cage and Drennick? Don't tell me you're looking for the reward.
Lucas sat straighter, his hands folded neatly atop the table.
No, we want to bargain. It's obvious that Zalma is a source of trouble for both of us now, so if you allow us to trap her in the astral cage and you keep your soldiers out of Libertalia...
He took a breath and prepared himself for what came next.
We'll give you your immortality.
Time stood still as Morag's eyes bore into Lucas.
You'd hand over the astral cage.
No, we keep the cage. You don't get to walk away with the keys to planetary domination.
Mermil chuckled.
What makes you think you're in a position to shackle the Demot?
Because it's obvious that Zalma has the most power in this whole ordeal. You had Drennick imprisoned, and Mermil seems to be quite the loyal dog.
Mermil's eyes narrowed, but he kept his mouth shut.
But Zalma, she's vying for control over the temples and dangling immortality on a string to get you to follow along.
Morag regarded her, his emotions hard to read on his alien face.
A bold assumption. You think you understand how all this works, girl?
No, but I've seen what she's capable of firsthand in Armillaria. If she gets her hands on the astral cage, it won't end well for any of us.
Mermil turned towards the Demot with an amused smirk.
Lady Macbeth actually has a point. My sister has quite the sadistic mind.
Morag lifted the goblet once more and took another drink.
I'm afraid I have bad news for you. Zalma disappeared nearly a week ago. Went to go check on the vorlith's progress with Drennick and never came back. Seems awfully convenient that her abomination decided to attack Armillaria at around the same time.
Why would she just up and leave like that?
Oh my, what a mystery. What could have possibly happened a week ago that would have caused my sister to take such sudden and drastic action?
His eyes drifted to Beth.
Oh, that's right. Lady Macbeth here stole the astral cage.
And the vorlith became her only option for extracting Drennick's cipher. But because Drennick kept resisting the vorlith's attempts to probe his mind, the only option for her was to feed it until it could overpower him.
And to overpower a mind like Drennick's would require a lot of feeding. A whole village worth, maybe more.
Mermil chuckled.
No, I could see the smoke coming from your ears. Your brain must have been working overtime to put that one together.
Liz's hand brushed lightly against Beth's beneath the table, a quiet anchor. Beth let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Liz's touch steadied her, enough that she unclenched her fingers and straightened in her seat. Morag's gaze swept over the table again, lingering on Beth before returning to Lucas. The Demot's voice was calm, but the weight behind it pressed down like a physical force.
I can't claim to know why Zalma chose to flee. Perhaps she lost control of the vorlith. Perhaps this is all part of a more elaborate scheme that I've yet to realize. Regardless of which, you are correct. Zalma has become a nuisance, one that I want taken care of.
Lucas leaned in, his tone steady.
Then we have common ground. Let's work together to trap her in the astral cage.
Not so fast. Zalma and Drennick are the only ones who know how the Parlin pilgrimage works.
Beth noticed Mermil's face twisting in annoyance at that.
Not even being trapped in the astral cage will guarantee their cooperation.
Morag leaned forward, setting his goblet aside with a solid clack.
But the winds of fate have caught our sails on this day. I have a garrison stationed in Terminus right now. The commander of said garrison has just learned that a certain resident is sitting on a collection of lockdown data units. Data units that Mermil has informed me came from Drennick's personal library. Odds are high that there's information on the pilgrimage hidden in there somewhere.
Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly.
You're saying this just came to light?
Morag didn't so much as blink.
Indeed, the timing is fortuitous.
Arcade leaned forward, folding his arms on the table.
So you get the data, you decipher it. You don't need Drennick or Zalma anymore.
Correct.
So how does this involve us?
Morig's tentacles curled.
Simple. You go to Terminus and assist my garrison in securing the data units.
Beth narrowed her eyes.
You want to send us to fetch it?
Consider it a joint operation. An officialization of our new relationship.
And if we bring it back, you'll agree to our terms?
Morig leaned back again, the whir of servos marking every shift.
We'll take down Zalma together. I'll make no claims to the astral cage, and I'll keep my armies out of Libertalia.
Lucas exchanged a brief glance with each of his companions. Liz gave a subtle nod. Arcade's expression remained unreadable. Beth, though tense, met his gaze with clear resolve. Finally, Lucas looked back at Morig and inclined his head.
Then we have an accord.
Mermel will be accompanying you, of course.
Mermel let out an annoyed sigh.
What a privilege.
Beth didn't bother hiding her contempt.
Hope you don't slow us down.
Mermel straightened, his eyes flashing.
I'll be sure to pack your leash.
That's enough. There's much to prepare, and I would prefer not to bear witness to another round of schoolyard bickering.
You leave for Terminus at first light. My people will brief you with what they've gathered so far upon your arrival. Until then...
He gestured towards the two women that were still flanking his chair. They bowed as they made their way to the seats down the row from Mermil and Hesh. When they were seated, Morig lifted his goblet.
A toast to new alliances.
The crystalline goblets were raised, some with enthusiasm, others with the bare minimum of ceremony. Beth, for a moment, found herself lost in the absurdity of it all. Here she was, dressed like nobility, at a feast inside of an ancient alien temple, making a toast with an alien warlord and his immortal lackey. She brought the goblet to her lips and took a measured sip. The wine was surprisingly smooth, sweet at first, then bitter on the back of her tongue. Several servants entered with more platters of steaming meats and stews, vivid salads gleaming with alien oils. It was the kind of feast that felt like a celebration, but the weight of the deal clung to Beth's mind like damp cloth. Morig remained mostly silent throughout the remainder of the meal, observing more than partaking. His presence was overwhelming even without words. Every time Beth looked up, she half expected to find his glowing eyes locked on her. And more often than not, they were. She tried not to let it bother her. Tomorrow they would walk into yet another unknown. But tonight, they would feast, they would drink, and they would sleep. And in the silence, the ghost of Saren's words would echo in her mind.
Do you fear death?